Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the European Union International Ocean Governance Forum 2021. My name is Alexander Müller. I'm the moderator. I'm the Managing Director of TMG, Think Tank for Sustainability, and I'm really happy to welcome more than 640 registered participants. My main role will be to keep the time and to try to manage the flow from one speaker to the other smoothly. Let me please start with some housekeeping information. First of all, this session will be recorded, but recording will only be done for the participants being on the screen, for the panelists and the speakers. Of course, you who are listening in via the website, you will not be recorded. I would like to thank also those who have put questions forward already during our registration. We have looked at these questions and we have taken them already into account. And I'm going to take up some of these questions when I'm going to raise questions to the panelists or to the speakers. If time permits, we will also try to follow the questions you are raising here on the screen, and I'm going to put them forward to the speakers. The main purpose of the meeting today is listening to your comments, to your questions, and these questions and your comments will inform the European Commission in their further work on oceans governance. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome for the welcome address, Charlina Vicheva, the Director General for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries from the European Commission. Charlina, the floor is yours. Happy that you are here.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm really happy, dear ladies and gentlemen, to welcome you all to our meeting. And I heard the number of 600, which is impressive. I'm really glad to see so many members of the ocean community from Europe and beyond joining us for this third edition of the International Ocean Governance Forum. The event today marks the end of the open and very inclusive consultation process to guide our next steps in strengthening governance of our ocean. If you would recall, we launched the process exactly 1 year ago. That was at the end of April 2020. Since then, the forum has managed to meet in several formats, bringing together ocean stakeholders from many different regions of our blue planet. We invited and accommodated discussions with ocean leaders and champions, and they have shared their vision for ocean sustainability at various high-level events. We also gathered representatives from various communities, from science, civil society, from multilateral organizations, from private sector and public authorities, and we discussed ocean challenges and solutions in various workshops. For some of you, this meant late evenings, night or early morning hours, and for all it meant that we had to adapt to rather quickly meet in work modalities by virtual means. So that was to substitute our well-known in-person exchanges. I would like to thank everyone for participating in this forum and sharing insights, ideas, and vision on how we can step up our efforts to tackle what is increasingly referred to the triple crisis of our oceans. Your commitment confirms that we need to scale up our efforts to ensure that we protect and use responsibly what the ocean can offer to all of us. We need to discuss challenges and opportunities together, across boundaries and across different sectors to identify the viable solutions. The recommendations that will be presented here today, which is the main objective of this event, will be a valuable input for driving the EU's agenda for ocean governance forward. They resonate well with the objectives of the European Green Deal and the priorities of the European Union's international engagement. The forum has put emphasis on some issues more than others, not because they are less important, but because these were the biases and priorities of the people that were consulted. We are conscious about that. And of course, we will keep on listening further, including today, and your voices and your reflections are more than welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Charlina, for welcoming everybody. Now it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce to you the Commissioner for the Environment, Oceans and Fisheries from the European Commission, Mr. Virginijus Sinkevicius, for his opening speech with the title, Accelerating Action for Ocean Sustainability. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm of course delighted to be with you as we kick off this virtual meeting of the EU's International Ocean Governance Stakeholder Forum. Achieving clean, healthy, productive and resilient oceans is one of the most important challenges of our times. This is not a new challenge. Under the 2030 agenda adopted in 2015, all EU-UN members already agreed on an SDG 14 that focuses on the conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources, and yet a triad of crises, namely climate-driven, ecosystem disruption, extensive pollution, and severe biodiversity loss, are placing considerable pressure on our oceans. I would go as far as to say that our oceans are facing a state of emergency. And ambitious domestic action is, of course, a vital part of the puzzle to solving this. It must be matched by effective and collaborative international ocean governance. This is a no-brainer. Our oceans are a shared global good, and our mutual success will depend on effective and collaborative international governance. The EU has sought to provide leadership in these efforts. As some of you may recall, the EU was the first major economy in the world to develop an ocean governance agenda back in 2016. Already then, we were convinced that to ensure ocean sustainability, we needed a joint effort built on the foundations of multilateralism and a rules-based international order. And this agenda has shaped EU's leadership through the delivery of concerted and targeted actions together with our partners. Since taking office in late 2019, the new European Commission has stepped up its environmental ambition with its landmark European Green Deal policy package, including our new biodiversity strategy. And this commitment to stepping up action does not stop at the European borders. We have made a commitment to our citizens to deliver a stronger Europe in the world, and I'm committed to fostering the role of the EU as a global leader in ocean governance. With that in mind, and given the complex path ahead of us, it is important to make sure that our international ocean governance agenda remains fit for purpose. We have therefore consulted broadly with ocean experts and people in the field. We have asked them to assess our priorities and actions and how they can more effectively match current growing challenges and needs. And we have carried out this evaluation in a very thorough manner. First, we have conducted an online consultation with stakeholders. Respondents have voiced their broad support for the EU's agenda and its overall scope and objective, which is a very welcome reassurance. Nevertheless, respondents have also called for a reinforced strategic orientation of that agenda, including by suggesting to pay more attention to climate change and biodiversity loss through the implementation of the ecosystem-based approach, to mainstream sustainability into sectoral policymaking, to pay more balanced policy and regulatory attention to all blue economy sectors, and to invest more in international cooperation control and enforcement, as well as in ocean observation. Second, we have commissioned an external assessment of our policy actions since the adoption of, in 2015, of the 2030 agenda. The assessment confirmed that our policy framework is largely relevant and coherent with strong links with the ocean-related targets of the 2030 agenda, efficient with considerable investment being made, although allocation of funds leave room for improvement, and effective, with the EU taking strong action to improve the status of the marine environment with tangible results in specific areas, such as the restoration of certain fish stocks and the establishment of marine protected areas. However, we are far from reversing the negative trends, and we need more. And third, as you are all aware, we have launched the International Ocean Governance Forum in 2020, built on the principle of shared responsibility for our ocean and the need for collective progress. The forum was created as a platform to share expertise, understanding, experiences, and good practices on ocean governance. And it has now reached its conclusion. It is now time for the key recommendations for action that emerge from it to be presented and discussed. And that is why we are gathered here today. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank and congratulate everyone involved for the hard work and results. There is a clear message coming out of this process. Yes, it is acknowledged that the EU acts strongly on ocean governance, and it has done a good job. However, much is still to be achieved, and we need to do much more. And let me say this. This message has been heard loud and clear, and we will spare no efforts to turn it into concrete actions. To start with, I'm happy to share with you today that we will update our oceans agenda next year based on the results of this process. But we also want the recommendations to be a source of inspiration worldwide, as well as the starting point for new partnerships and shared commitments to the transformative action that is urgently needed to protect our oceans. A number of important principles will guide this work. We need to do more to ensure effective, cross-cutting, and integrated ocean governance that builds on strong partnerships, cross-sectoral and international cooperation, and multilateral dialogue. Ocean sustainability cannot be achieved in isolation, as the G14 targets are interconnected with each other with the rest of the 2030 agenda. Collaboration and coordination across the sectors and boundaries are essential if we are to be successful. The EU must act as a reliable partner and as responsible actor leading by example. We also need to work with others, support others, and share our expertise and experience. If we are to effectively tackle the challenges we face, ocean sustainability and the delivery of SDG 14 are challenges that require teamwork. This is exactly the spirit of today's forum. This is the EU's very own essence, and it is something we can bring to our work with our international partners to ensure a genuine, meaningful, and balanced collaboration. Our strong belief is an integrated approach is reflected in the speakers and panelists on this forum. I very much look forward to hearing your ideas, views, and comments. Together with the recommendations, they will support us in further developing the EU's plan of action for the future of international oceans governance. Also, let me assure you that as we are developing this new ambitious agenda, we are committed to continuing our existing efforts. Just next week, on 28th of April, I will host a high-level ministerial meeting with the current and potential co-sponsors of 2 additional large-scale marine protected areas in the waters around Antarctica, one in East Antarctica and another one in the Weddell Sea. We will also continue our engagement to concluding an ambitious high seas treaty this summer, as well as an ambitious outcome for ocean climate action at the COP26 in November. I will leave it at that for now, but let me finish by thanking you very much for your engagement in this process. Your views, expertise, and insights are absolutely essential to move the EU's ocean governance agenda forward. We will carefully listen to what you have to say and to which actions you will recommend. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner, for opening this International Ocean Governance Forum, and especially for informing us that you are planning to update your strategy and that this forum provides input for the update of this strategy. This shows the importance of the participatory approach. I would like to raise 1 or 2 follow-up questions. First, you mentioned that a lot has to be done, especially the ongoing negotiations on a new legal instrument for marine biological diversity beyond national jurisdiction, BBNJ, is a historic process and opportunity to set the governance of more than 64% of the ocean surface on a sustainable footing. What is needed to make this new legal instrument a success, and how is the European Union going to support its future implementation, Commissioner?
Thank you very much for your question. In order to be successful and building on the vision of the Convention on the Law of the Sea, what we need is to strengthen the existing governance framework, better protect marine biodiversity, and place cooperation and science at the heart of the management regime for the high seas. More concretely, we need a treaty that will provide for arrangements that help overcome the current fragmentation of high seas governance. This can be achieved by establishing concrete coordination and cooperation mechanisms to ensure collaboration among the multiple organizations and agreements that have stakes in how the high seas are managed. This collaboration will be an absolute necessity, for instance, for establishing marine protected areas, carrying out environmental assessments, or for monitoring the agreement's implementation. Moreover, in the next decades, the number and nature of activities in the oceans that will potentially affect marine biodiversity is set to increase and diversify. Therefore, we need a future-proof treaty that will provide the necessary tools and procedures to make sure that we can properly assess the likely impact of current and future activities and define and implement the necessary conservation measures accordingly. Finally, the new instrument must be fair and equitable and should in particular include provisions to strengthen the capacities of developing countries. This should allow them to benefit from relevant marine, scientific and technical developments and to participate in all aspects related to the sustainable use and conservation of marine biodiversity in the high seas. Of course, universal participation in the new treaty and strong political will be needed to ensure its efficiency. And the EU is fully committed to reach such a consensual instrument and to thereafter promote and support its implementation both at home and abroad through its policy, diplomatic, and of course, cooperation means.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner, for this strong and very clear statement. Let me raise a second and last question to you, because parallel to the BBNJ, the United Nations is moving towards the agreement of an ambitious new biodiversity goal, in particular for marine protected areas at COP15. At the same time, while the negotiations are going on, human activities are leading to degradation of marine ecosystems. This continues, and emerging activities such as deep seabed mining are projected to lead to further loss of biodiversity if it's going to take place. This is definitely an area of conflict. How could the European Union champion ocean degradation neutrality, including in areas beyond national jurisdiction, in multilateral fora, as, by the way, recommended by the IOG Forum? Commissioner, please.
Kindly thank you for your question. The EU is fully committed to the goal of reaching healthy and resilient seas and oceans through the European Green Deal. As we have committed to under the EU Biodiversity Strategy, we are working to protect at least 30% of EU seas by 2030, of which at least 1/3 will be under strict protection regime. And this 30% target is also being promoted at the global level and will hopefully be included in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework at COP15. In the international context, as already mentioned, the EU and its member states have also proposed the designation of 2 new large-scale marine protected areas in the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. One in East Antarctica and another in the Weddell Sea. In addition, we are taking a zero-tolerance approach to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. But your question also addresses the emerging yet critical issue of deep sea mining. As stated in the biodiversity strategy, our position is very clear here and based on a precautionary and ecosystem-based approaches. We will therefore advocate within relevant international bodies that marine minerals cannot be exploited before the effects of deep sea mining on the marine environment, biodiversity, and human activities have been sufficiently researched, and that the risks are understood and that the technologies and operational practices are able to demonstrate no serious harm to the environment. Finally, the European Commission, through the new funding program, Horizon Europe, has inaugurated the mission on healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters that will help develop solutions to enhance sustainable use and management of ocean resources.
Thanks a lot, Commissioner. Thanks a lot, Commissioner, for taking your time to open this forum and for your strong statement on setting the course for a sustainable blue planet. Thanks a lot. And we are now happy to receive a video message by John Kerry, the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. He is the first ever principal to sit on the National Security Council entirely dedicated to climate change. And we will see and listen for the next 6 to 7 minutes to this video message.
Good morning, everyone. Before I begin, I want to thank the EU Commission for inviting me to share a few remarks during the EU International Ocean Governance Stakeholder Forum. I also want to thank the EU for its leadership on climate and for its partnership in tackling this global crisis. As we work to raise global ambition and keep the goals of the Paris Agreement within reach, the US-EU relationship is more critical than ever. As you know, I'm pleased to now serve as President Biden's Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. And literally, I now spend my days exclusively focused on how the United States and the global community can rise to the climate challenge, to the climate crisis, really. I regret that the United States, at the national level, has been absent in the global fight against climate change in recent years. It happened without any basis of fact or evidence or any of science, certainly. But I promise you, we are now doing everything in our power in an all-of-government initiative ordered by President Biden to make up for lost time. We obviously have a lot of work in front of us. I hate to say it, but we're now heading towards a catastrophic future with somewhere between more than 3 degrees Celsius up to 4 point something of warming currently. That's what we're on track to. We're not getting the Paris levels implemented, let alone the 1.5 degrees. It is absolutely essential, therefore, for our communities, for our economies, for the planet itself, that we work to achieve the goal set in Paris, either well below 2, which certainly isn't 1.9, 1.8, 1.7, and hold warming, if we can, to 1.5 degrees. This is essential to protect the ocean as well as all of the land-based area. As I often say, ocean stewardship and climate stewardship are absolutely two sides of the very same coin. We cannot protect the ocean, which is struggling under the impacts of ocean acidification and warming, without increasing global climate ambition. But the fact is that the ocean is also a major part of the solution to climate change, and it offers a world of opportunities for a thriving economic recovery, from scaling up offshore renewable energy to protecting and restoring blue carbon ecosystems to decarbonizing the international shipping sector. The ocean is a source of sustainable solutions to reduce greenhouse gas pollution. And when I look at the suite of climate solutions that we have before us, I see, and I hope you share this vision, of the greatest economic transformation the world has seen since the Industrial Revolution. There are millions of jobs that will go with this transition. Of course, we also have to work to build the resilience of our communities and ecosystems in the face of climate impacts that we simply can't avoid. I was very happy, for example, for the work we did during the Obama administration in this vein, including the creation of the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area. This U.S. administration is very aware of the inextricable link between the ocean and climate change. We know, as you do, you cannot address climate change without the power of the ocean and without addressing the challenges of the ocean, and you cannot protect the ocean without addressing the climate crisis. We must break down the silos that have existed for too long between these two arenas. As I said, I can promise you that the United States is working to do our part. Since the very first month of our administration, we've been working on the goal to conserve at least 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030. Just last month, we adopted a goal to deploy 30 gigawatts of offshore wind in the United States by 2030. and we will now be working to achieve our ambitious new NDC under the Paris Agreement. At the international level, we will be working to ensure that the road to Glasgow results in ambitious ocean and climate action, and that COP26 includes a strong ocean outcome that builds on the legacy of COP25, known as the Blue COP. Today, on the occasion of this Oceans Governance Forum, I'd also like to underline that the United States has long supported the 3 marine protected area proposals in the Southern Ocean under the Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, known as CAMLR. And we are calling on CAMLR members to adopt these MPAs at the next meeting, the 40th anniversary of CAMLR. These unique areas are vulnerable to the impacts of the climate crisis, and they must be protected. It's not enough just to set them aside. We all need to provide the enforcement and protection that is meaningful. The climate crisis requires us to work together as a global community, and I'm very grateful to have all of you as partners. I look forward to working with you to create a carbon-free, climate-resilient, and biodiverse future for our ocean and for all of us. Good luck in your work. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John Kerry. A climate resilient, biodiverse, carbon-free future. That's what we are going to discuss here at our International Oceans Governance Forum. And within the high-level part of this forum, I would now like to invite Abu Chumbe, the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Blue Economy and Fisheries from Zanzibar, Tanzania, to take the floor and to address this meeting, Shaping Zanzibar's Blue Future. Abu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank the EU for inviting us in today's great occasion. Let me just by saying that I'm from the Western Indian Ocean region in the matter of saying planet ocean. And in the Western Indian Ocean region, I'm from the so-called Nairobi Convention area. And therefore, you cannot talk about the region or the country or the islands without addressing the key issues in the Western Indian Ocean region, and especially in the Nairobi Convention area. Now, for the purpose of this particular presentation, the Western Indian Ocean region has got a potential for sustainable ocean governance and blue economy in the context of deriving resources from coastal tourism, fisheries, mariculture, mining, and energy. But it does have its own challenges. And some of the key challenges include the whole issue of poverty eradication and lack of economies of scale across coastal states and the islands in the region. But there are also a focus on the challenges concerning maritime safety and security and what's happening right now in the northern Mozambique Channel. We also have the impacts of climate change, marine pollution, marine litter, and the whole context of how do we address the focus on critical habitats. But again, we've been discussing about regional fisheries, illegal fishing, and the whole recent episode concerning yellowfin tuna stocks in our ocean. Issues of limited financing, human resources, lack of internal markets, these are all part and parcel of the process that affect us in the context of how do we address blue economy, ocean governance, and how we move together as the region and as the global platform. Now, why is the ocean governance and blue economy the major issue for even Tanzania at this moment? Because we've got population growth coming along, we've got the impacts of marine pollution, we've got the expanding small-scale fisheries and mariculture value chains in the urge for alternative and sustainable livelihoods. We need to help our people. We're talking about overexploitation of critical habitats, coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass ecosystems. Again and again, climate change issues is at the center of our development challenges. And the whole focus of marine litter is a very central issue in our country. Now, we have committed in the past, we are committing today, we will be committing in the context of integrating ocean governance and climate adaptation, addressing ocean policy drivers for social, economic, and environmental goals, as an issue of promoting public-private partnership in sustainable fisheries, seaweeds, and in addressing mariculture value chains for our communities, developing our maritime safety and security, and how to fight illegal fishing and strengthen our monitoring, control, and surveillance. We are also talking about promoting social equity, ecosystem management, increasing social benefits for our people. Most important part is promoting bilateral and regional collaboration in the Western Indian Ocean region through existing mechanisms, including the UNEP Nairobi Convention, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, the regional fisheries management bodies, SADC, Indian Ocean Commission, and many more organizations. Now, we also have to talk about the nationally determined contribution and how Tanzania is strengthening its SNDCs in addressing management of coastal resources and beach erosion, promoting early warning systems, enhancing management of saltwater intrusion and its adaptive capacity, and of course the whole focus of mangrove and shoreline restoration programs, and enhancing overall the conservation of fishery and resource management in our coastal states and within the islands of Zanzibar. Now I have to address how COVID-19 has impacted on our climate ocean lands in Zanzibar. For a while, we did not have revenues to manage and protect coastal marine ecosystems. The tourism financing was disrupted last year. Disruption in the implementation of the climate change strategy was severe. There had been an increase in illegal fishing in our marine protected areas, deforestation of fragile mangrove forests. We've been talking about poaching of marine animals, sea turtles, and other species. We have had exacerbated environmental pollution and degradation, and there was a critical need of a comprehensive climate ocean finance solutions to support our recovery. And that is where we developed the Zanzibar Blue Economy Policy Framework under such pressure. So our Blue Economy policy is basically centered around upskilling, infrastructure, partnerships, and research. The focus is on effective coordinating and managing the development of the ocean and its endowments for significant contribution to economic prosperity, but also the policy is seen as the best way to enhance economic growth for our local communities, increase incomes, and help protect the coastal and marine environment. And it does have 5 priority areas defined in the Blue Economy Policy, namely fisheries and mariculture, maritime trade and infrastructure, energy, tourism, and of course the whole focus of maritime, marine and maritime governance. Now, as a ministry, we have our priority commitments for Blue Economy. For example, mobilizing adequate resources like human, financial, and technical to support ocean governance and Blue Economy goals, build adaptive capacity in research and scientific knowledge and ocean governance and Blue Economy, strengthen the institutions responsible for the Sustainable Development Goal number 14 targets, but also strengthen compliance with multilateral environmental agreements, protocols related to ocean, climate, environment, fisheries, maritime systems. Most important for our country, for the coastal state, for the islands of Zanzibar, is to engage with the communities who have so much hope with the prospects of Blue Economy. In terms of equity, in terms of access, in terms of markets, in terms of benefits, in terms of opportunities, in the ownership of the Blue Economy agenda for Zanzibar. Yes, we do have coordination challenges. For example, we wished we had an integrated ocean policy blueprint for the entire Western Indian Ocean region. We do not have that at the moment. We need to promote communicating the Blue Economy across social, economic, and environmental spectra across the country and across the region. We need to promote economic diversification and value addition, more like a dialogue process that needs national and regional support. We need to realign, not to reinvent institutional arrangements or hierarchy for blue economy implementation, and of course for the whole context of addressing the ocean policy drivers. Regional cooperation is key. International advocacy on ocean governance and blue economy is a very much welcome initiative, but also we need to now start adopting to emerging focus areas such as marine spatial planning and the whole concept of blue biotrade and how the local island communities can benefit from such initiative. So how do we connect? For example, an integrated roadmap that will articulate Zanzibar's blue economy brand, a strategic framework that will prioritize Zanzibar's blue economy needs and trends. We're talking about national blue economy communication strategy that will inform on emerging focus areas and the need for transformation. We need to keep on the momentum in dialogue with development partners within Tanzania, alongside regional cooperation, the regional seas programs, the regional economic commissions, the African Union, the UNDP, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, SADC, European Union, World Bank, Norway, UK, US, and many, many more. But the most important part for the islands right now in Zanzibar is to build a sustainable blue economy financing model for Zanzibar. Now, the key messages from our perspective is that we need to integrate, again, the biodiversity, climate, and the ocean economy financing. We need to explore options to establish an innovative blue economy investment models for ocean solutions, and it's very important for our local communities. Integrate our poverty eradication programs in our sustainable blue economy plans, involve them in every aspect of blue economy to enhance their ownership. Their ownership is key if we really do need to protect our coastal and marine resources. And of course, develop incentives to unlock private sector investments for sustainable use of our ocean assets. And we need to engage marine spatial planning, research, innovation, and blue financing. And in the end, I'll always want to repeat this. We need to realign, not reinvent our ocean solutions. Chair, I thank you for that.
Abu, thank you, Sarah, very much. Abu Chambe, the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Blue Economy and Fisheries in Zanzibar. You are, at your country, is an important partner for the European Union, including for ocean governance. And I would like to thank you for really sharing your perspective, including informing about the impact and how you are going to deal with COVID-19. Thank you very much. Dear participants, I would like now to go over to the representation of recommendations from the IOG Forum, which will be discussed afterwards in two different panels. And I have the pleasure to introduce to you Pierre Strosser from Action. He is head of Action and has worked for more than 20 years in the field of environmental issues. He will be followed by Sheila Heymans, the Executive Director of the European Marine Board since 2018, and she's a professor in ecosystem modeling at the University of the Highlands and Islands in Scotland. And then last but not least, Sebastian Unger. He leads the work on ocean governance at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, and he's working also for TMG, a think tank for sustainability, and he also lectures on marine conservation at Potsdam University. The three of you have the floor, beginning with Pierre Strosser. And please remember, keep the time. We will have a health break at 3 o'clock sharp. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Alexander. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheila, Sebastian, and myself have a challenging task in presenting the richness and all the contributions you made in the debates of the IOG Forum process. If I go back in history, we could have started by once upon a time, but realizing that it was only a year ago when we started the process. And during this year, much has happened. From the start, when we started to set the scene, agree on the challenges we had to address in the IOG forum process, identify solution, try to understand and capture how best we would implement these solutions in operational terms, consolidate them in identifying how best the EU could play a role in the implementation. And here we are today, presenting, sharing, and discussing this recommendation. Quite a long way has passed. What does the IOG forum process deliver? As was shared in the introduction by the Commissioner, you will find a large number of practical actions that can enhance the effectiveness of international ocean governance, covering different sectors, decision-making scales and action types, from governance, capacity building, knowledge, or financing. What it delivers also, and that's what we are going to illustrate and present today, are recommendations for EU action, aiming for an ocean that is clean and healthy, productive, resilient and understood. And clearly what is important to stress today is that we are far from being exhaustive. There are many challenges in the ocean related to ocean governance that we have not touched upon, but still there are many practical recommendations that have emerged from the process. These recommendations, we have worked them in a series of practical opportunities for implementations, more than 60, where we identify how the European Commission, EU member state and EU stakeholders could seize the different pathways to make them happen. As pathways, we looked in particular at 6, how the EU could lead by example, drive international negotiations, initiate and steer new governance mechanisms, drive capacity and financing, strengthen and initiate partnerships and alliances, and finally, support innovation and knowledge. And in the next slides, when we will refer to these pathways, you will see some icons appearing from here to there, stressing which pathways we see as the most important or essential to deliver what we aim at in terms of strengthening international ocean governance. Let's now start our journey with the first harbor. The first harbor is called productive. In this harbor, we have discussed with IOG forum members 2 main components. The first one dealt with the mechanisms that would deliver sustainable blue economy. We discussed in particular of the needs to support sound and transparent blue economy investment decisions at 2 scales, at the project investment scale on one side and at the regional scale. And we, in particular, stress the importance of carrying out sound assessments, considering cumulative impacts, ecosystem integrity, and impacts on ecosystem services delivered, including for local coastal communities. And then we stress the importance of setting and applying common social and environmental standards to all blue economy sectors, stressing the importance of looking at both social and environmental issues together if we want to deliver sustainable blue economy. We also dive into the management of fish stocks, discussing at large the different options that would help strengthening their management, with 2 important pillars that were identified. First, strengthening fisheries management governance to deliver sustainable fish stocks. And second, support countries in the uptake and implementation of existing instruments, because indeed there are quite some instruments that are there in place, like the port state measures, the Cape Town Agreement, or the Working Fishing Convention. And in these discussions, we regularly discussed the potential that regional fisheries management organization on one side, but also EU sustainable fisheries partnership agreements could play in supporting the actions that were proposed. What does it mean in practice? 3 examples that we have extracted from the 15+ options that were worked out on the basis of IOG Forum members. The first one relates to the need for sustainable blue economy and identifying the importance of supporting the development and use of strategic blue economy vision at sea basin scales, building on open stakeholder processes, sound application of strategic environmental assessment, and also the sound assessment of the ecological, social, and economic trade-off of different development scenarios. And one established these visions could guide, could help drive investments, public and private, to support blue economy. The second illustration that links to the management of fisheries was to facilitate the benchmarking of fisheries management practices at 2 levels. One between regional fisheries management organizations, similar to the COBE process with tuna regional fisheries management organization, and the second one between countries partnering with the EU Strategic Fisheries Partnership Agreement. And finally, be exemplary in reducing and halting unsustainable fishing practices in line with the EU biodiversity strategy on one side and with its philosophy for areas outside the EU waters. And in this recommendation, there were also elements supporting innovation on gear selectivity, so rather technical issues, but at the same time on sustainable ocean food system. The next harbor is resilience, and I give the floor to Sheila that will continue the journey with you.
Hi, yes. Thank you very much, Pierre. So in this next harbor, as Pierre mentions, we specifically look at resilience. And the first one is looking at ocean resilience as a central principle for the climate change debate. And here we had at least 4 good actions that we need to look at. The first is that we really need to promote a whole of the ocean governance approach. Where we are actually mainstreaming climate change in all relevant ocean governance organizations in order to combat climate change. We also need to towards a zero emissions maritime industry, where we consider all of the gases, all of the greenhouse gases, and all airborne pollutants. Then we need to foster nature-based ocean solutions that can deliver co-benefits for biodiversity, ecosystem resilience, and human livelihoods. And we need to increase the allocation of financial resources to resilience-enhancing strategies. We really need to actually enhance and work with the strategies that we already have. Then we also need to pay attention to the resilience of the governance system, of the ocean governance system. We need to bring forward the discussions and resolutions on ocean governance resilience in our different decision-making scale bodies, so the regional seas conventions at the global scale and at the UN. We need to also support research, specifically the development of adaptive management methods and tools, and propose and apply resilient operational mechanisms that can give visibility to resilience and ecosystems. And we need to give visibility to resilience and ecosystem-based approaches in our ocean literacy programs. So again, 3 examples. The first one is that we need to support the assessment, implementation, and monitoring of nature-based solutions. And we can do that via dedicated capacity development programs, in partnerships for innovative approaches, and the establishment of communities of practice for instance, via a virtual platform for contributions. We also need to share experiences of our resilience enhancing finance instruments. We need to develop coherent guidance on financing ocean resilience and seize the opportunities that are offered by the existing instruments and initiatives, like the Blue Natural Capital, like trust funds. And we also need to look at resource mobilization initiatives. Then we need to raise the profile of resilience at different EU fora. So under the BBNJ negotiation, for instance, with fisheries related discussions, under the United Nations informal consultative processes on oceans and the law of the sea. And we need to explore possible adaptations within the government system and in institutions on delivering resilience. Then the second third harbour that we're talking about is the understood system, so aiming for an ocean that's understood. And here we basically have that we need to strengthen the science-society policy interface. So we need to find ways to share good practice and to support objectives for a clean, healthy, productive, resilient, and understood ocean. And we need to optimize the flow of knowledge at the ocean science policy interface so that we can improve evidence-based decision-making and that so that we can overcome the barriers to integrate and uptake the objective knowledge into policymaking. We also need to develop standardized ocean indicators, and we need to increase the coherency and alignment in the reporting on the state of the ocean. Then we also need to enhance the science in this science-society policy interface. Here we really feel like we need to strengthen the co-design transdisciplinary science to develop a knowledge base for international ocean governance that is fit for purpose, that fits users' needs. And we really need to support the coordination of ocean observations in Europe and lead in increasing the spatial and temporal resolution in the global ocean. Obviously, ocean observations are the backbone of the ocean knowledge system. And we need to increase the open access and interoperability of ocean data so that we can actually use the big data applications and global data products to get to the prediction of, that we need for decision making. Then we have, again, 3 examples of how we can do that. The first one is by establishing a transdisciplinary international ocean governance research forum, where we can join the knowledge production and collaboration. And this should build on the existing initiatives, including, for instance, the Global Stakeholder Forum of the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the Belmont Forum, Future Earth, and so forth. We also need to establish transdisciplinary training programs that can promote both knowledge exchange between scientists, industry, and policymakers in Europe and beyond, but also that can promote data literacy among scientists, industry, and industrial professionals, policymakers, and Europe. And then finally, we need to support the sustained long-term capacity for co-designing, coordinating, and managing the integrated ocean observations by building on the existing European coordination initiatives like EU for Ocean Ops and EOS. And we think that the European Commission could really play a role in connecting funders and donors to improve the efficiencies of national ocean observation systems. Next, I think I'll hand over to Sebastian, who will take it away.
Thanks, Sheila. The IOG Forum also highlighted the urgent need to accelerate action for the conservation and sustainable use of marine ecosystems and combating marine pollution to achieve an ocean that is healthy and clean. 5 key actions with a number of implementation pathways have been recommended. They include a new global goal for degradation neutrality covering 100% of the ocean that should be championed by the EU in order to strengthen global marine ecological resilience. And I'm pleased that the Commissioner already in his opening remarks has related to this proposed action. Second is the development of a global one ocean conservation strategy to identify, designate, and establish networks of well-managed marine protected areas to ensure the protection of the most crucial marine areas in support of the proposed target of protecting 30%, at least 30% of the world's ocean by 2030, within the framework of the future post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And third, enhance efforts for ecological restoration of areas that are already degraded in support of the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. So these first three recommendations put forward a set of actions with regard to marine ecosystems and biodiversity that can be summarized as no harm from human activities in 100% of the ocean, at least 30% of the ocean designated as marine protected areas, and restoration of ocean systems that are already degraded. All these three elements need to come together to ensure an ocean that is healthy and biodiverse. Moreover, the EU and its member states should foster the development and the implementation of holistic ecosystem-based governance approaches that function across different sectoral organizations and legal boundaries that are set up by the governance system. Such approaches are urgently needed to help achieve targets that are set out already by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as the linked Global Climate and Biodiversity Agenda, as the climate envoy John Kerry has stressed also in his opening message. Finally, the IOG Forum recommended that the EU should pursue a zero pollution strategy, accounting both for land and sea-based pollution, including plastic pollution, lost and discarded fishing gears, nutrient, different contaminants, as well as noise and air pollution. This requires, inter alia, the strengthening of the global governance framework on combating and preventing marine pollution, for example, through a global framework or a new global agreement on plastic pollution. But it also requires the fostering of the existing international capacities to prevent and tackle marine pollution at the source and progressing towards a circular economy. Let me now introduce again 3 examples of proposed opportunities for implementation of these recommendations. I will start with the beige example on the bottom. Complementary to new proposed global targets of conserving at least 30% of the ocean, the so-called 30 by 30 target, the IOG Forum stressed in particular the need to embed such a global target in an ecosystem approach that works for the entire ocean, for 100%. To reverse current trends of overexploitation and ocean degradation, the IOG Forum therefore recommended to champion a new global goal for ocean degradation neutrality in 100% of the ocean, including by phasing out and preventing maritime activities that cause ecosystem loss or degradation, and in line with the precautionary principle, to ensure a transition towards low impacts and no serious harm from human activities such as fisheries or possibly emerging sectors such as deep seabed mining. And now to the green example. With regard to ocean restoration, the EU should lead by example, restoring at least 30% of degraded ocean systems within EU waters, and work also at the same time with like-minded states towards similar action at the global level. Such efforts should be supported by a global network of local scale restoration initiatives where this is actually happening, and be supported with an effective knowledge hub and the development of appropriate restoration capacities. The EU biodiversity already foresees such restoration targets, and this provides a good opportunity to align the EU biodiversity strategy also with the EU's action for global ocean health. And the third example in blue, here I would like to highlight the need to move towards more holistic ocean governance. The IOG Forum recommended the development of novel collaborative arrangement and strategies among competent management organizations, states and stakeholders at the scale of marine regions. And we heard Abu Jumbe in his opening remarks how important regional cooperation is, and he highlighted this at the very case of the Western Indian Ocean. Such arrangements should help to develop common visions for marine regions and adopt complementary objectives, targets, and approaches for implementation to address these interlinked and overlapping sustainability issues. In closing, I would like to refer and think about the way forward. Bringing together ocean stakeholders from all of Europe and different marine regions worldwide, the International Ocean Governance Forum has voiced broad support for the EU's International Ocean Governance Agenda, both in its scope and its objectives. The forum's recommendation now call for a reinforced strategic orientation of the agenda that is backed by full implementation in Europe and through European actors together. Without being exhaustive, really, I mean, this virtually impossible with this broad agenda in addressing all international ocean governance challenges. However, these recommendations for ocean action underline the need to upscale efforts on all fronts to tackle the ocean crisis, as well as to be adaptive in managing new and emerging challenges. The scale of the problems we are facing will require an all-hands-on-deck approach. Such an approach would benefit from the full political, scientific, and societal capacity in all of Europe. To make the full use of the different capacities and complementary roles of the EU and its member states, it is therefore also recommended that the different actors and the different governance levels in the EU reflect about their common capacities and their joint collaborative approaches in order to create greater synergies between the EU member states, the European Commission, and the European External Action Service, to foster integrated governance approaches to support a holistic EU ocean policy for the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of the ocean, and to make the full use of the collective diplomatic capacity of the EU and its member states in international ocean governance. Finally, in closing, I would like to thank, on behalf of all partners in our consortium, the participants of the IOG Forum for all the excellent and very valid input. We are very much looking forward to continue working with you for sustainable and transformative ocean governance in turning these recommendations that we have worked on collaboratively into actions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Pierre, Sheila, and Sebastian for presenting the recommendations of the IOG Forum. We all now have deserved a break, but please come back at 3:15 Central European Summer Time, because we will have two very important panels. The first panel with international renowned experts discussing the question, are we steering the right course? And then afterwards, we are going to have a second panel dealing with the European Union's all crew on deck approach, all working together. And I can promise you, we will have 6 director generals or directors from the European Commission, maybe the highest density of director generals and directors of the European Commission you can have on your screen. So please come back on time, 3:15, and enjoy your break. Dear participants of the European Union International Ocean Governance Forum 2021, welcome back. I hope you had enjoyed your break and you had time to digest the speeches and the recommendations we have received. It is my pleasure now to introduce you to the first panel we are going to have for the next 45 minutes, a panel of renowned international experts. And the overarching question is, are we steering the right course? A difficult question, and I'm really looking forward to receive the answers from our panelists. Let me briefly introduce all the panelists to you before I'm going to raise the questions. And dear participants, many of you have already submitted questions when you had registered. So we took your questions and we tried to phrase them in a way that I can introduce your questions to the panelists. The first panelist is Sigrid Lüber. She is president and founder of Ocean Care. Welcome, Sigrid. The second panelist is Dr. Charlotte de Fontombert, the global lead for Blue Economy from the World Bank, working in Washington, D.C., but being active all over the world. She will be followed by Nadia Pinardi, the professor of oceanography in the University of Bologna, and she's the vice president of the Commission for Observation Infrastructure and Information Systems of WMO. Afterwards, I'm going to raise questions to Jakob Granit, the Director General of the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, and he's chair of the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CAMALAR. And last but not least, I'm happy to introduce to you Dr. Amadou Dol. He's the team leader of PESCAO from ECOWAS. And as you know, ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States established in 1975 by a treaty. And he is going to also answer my questions. My dear panelists, for every question, you have around 2 to 3 minutes to answer, and I will try to keep the time. Let me start with you, Sigrid. Sigrid, President of Ocean Care. One of the key challenges is to combat different types of pollution in the oceans from multiple sources. So there is no overarching global agreement to combat plastic pollution. From your perspective, how could the international ocean governance help to pursue a global zero pollution strategy? Sigrid, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The plastic industry is planning to expand plastic production by at least 40% in the next 5 years. If we do not act to address the pollution by these hazardous materials at each stage of its life cycle, with an emphasis on source reduction, the marine plastic pollution crisis will get much worse. The most feasible and effective way to minimize marine plastic pollution is through prevention. This can only be achieved through stringent upstream controls, global market restriction, and binding reduction targets via a legal mandate and a binding implementation mechanism. Such a global framework is also an enabler for better governance that can in turn trigger further innovation. Our goal is for a resolution to be adopted at UNEA 5 with a clear mandate to negotiate a new global instrument addressing the full life cycle of plastics, including reduction of virgin production levels, phase out of toxic substances through the whole life cycle, financial implications such as polluter pays principle with a clear and an ambitious timeline and adequate financing plan for the negotiation.
So thanks a lot, Sigrid. Let me follow up. There is an increasing awareness of other types of pollutants in the marine environment, such as noise and especially the impacts of the noise on species and ecosystems. What specific steps in ocean governance should be taken to avoid and mitigate impacts from these types of pollution? And again, what is your recommendation? How could the European Union facilitate concrete action?
Yes, there is an increasing awareness of other forms of pollution, and underwater noise is a good example due to its transboundary nature, the noise and climate change nexus, and the fact that noise has an impact on all kinds of species in the ecosystem, from the tiniest zooplankton to the largest marine mammal. Let's look at the two most pertinent noise-generating activities. Commercial shipping, which is responsible for approximately 2.9% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and the search for new oil and gas resources using seismic air guns. Oh, excuse me. Science has shown that most feasible and effective way to avoid the impacts of underwater noise is to implement a ban on hydrocarbon exploration, which would put countries in line with the Paris Agreement, and to deploy ship speed reductions. A recent study has shown that a reduction of ship speed by 10% would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 13% and noise pollution by about 40%. Furthermore, the most effective way to mitigate the impacts of ocean noise is to make use of uniform and robust environmental impact assessments before approving noise-generating activities, to adopt specific management plans to protect sensitive areas from noise emissions, and most importantly, the correct implementation of the precautionary principle for noise impacts from activities such as deep sea mining. Lastly, the EU should take ambitious environmental and conservation-oriented positions in regional and international fora and lead by example. A prime opportunity is the upcoming negotiation on the international legally binding BBNJ instrument in August. The EU should actively work towards the adoption of a progressive agreement that manages transboundary pollution and includes a requirement for robust and consistent environmental impact assessments, irrespective of jurisdiction or the origin of the activity.
Thanks a lot, Sigrid, for this very clear statement. I would now like to invite Dr. de Fontombert from the World Bank to take the floor. She has authored and co-authored several thematic reports, the Sunken Billions Revisited, and also the United Nations report on the blue economy. And the blue economy can be an opportunity to create long-lasting sustainable economic growth, also in response to the economic and social consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. Charlotte, from your experience, what are key conditions to ensure its sustainability, and what could be cornerstones for a blue economy, including at a regional scale?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to the organizers of this incredibly timely event. I'm just going to note before I start that the EU is an exceptional partner for the World Bank, both in their support of a multi-donor trust fund we have on the blue economy, but also recognizing the key role the EU played in the development of the Sustainable Blue Economy financial principles. Thank you for highlighting the fact that COVID and COVID rebuilding basically resets the clock and gives us an opportunity to rebuild better, to rebuild bluer. I'm just going to say that one of the things we need to think about is whether everything needs to be rebuilt. So we have an exceptional once-in-a-lifetime occasion to really think about the impacts of what we're doing. We often make a distinction between the blue economy, which is an approach, and the ocean economy, which is the totality of oceanic sectors. And basically, what Bank recognizes is that having a more sustainable approach, which is exactly what you asked me about, is basically about the impacts of oceanic sectors on ocean health, but it's also very much about integration. And I want to, again, congratulate the EU on the progress that you've made in the document that we are discussing today. It is about using marine spatial planning, and it's about understanding what the impact of one sector is going to have on other sectors, and on ocean health. And I would just like to add one thing, which is we have a pretty good sense now about what the blue economy approach requires and what needs to happen. But the big question is about the financing and how can we find and secure the financing to scale up this approach and to basically fund the transition to a blue economy.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. You were referring to impacts of human activities on oceans, and unsustainable fisheries not only is the main driver of ocean decline, but also comes at a massive economic and societal cost. So from your perspective, what alternative exists and what actions should be taken to arrive at a sustainable and profitable level of fishing?
Okay, thank you for that question. I would maybe start with a caveat, which is perhaps unsustainable fishery is the main source of impact on ocean health, but I would say that climate change is also a major driver. And what basically happens is that it's not necessarily one impact or another, it's the cumulative impact that tends to really put oceans on the edge of collapse from a health perspective. Now, the good thing, quote unquote, about fisheries and sustainable fisheries is that we know so much about the kind of reforms that we need to enact, and that sustainability is not a pipe dream, it's very real. And we actually know that we need to focus on overcapacity, overfishing, and some of the factors that drive this. So you mentioned that I'm the author of a report from the bank on sunken billions, where it was tremendously interesting. We showed through rigorous economic analysis that not only are we destroying the fish stocks on which we depend, but we're also subsidizing, if you will, this over fishing, so this destructive fishing, to the tune of about more than $80 billion a year, US dollars, which are foregone to overfishing. I want to highlight a couple of obvious avenues that we know we need to pursue. One is the issue of subsidies. And the issue is being discussed right now in Geneva within the WTO, and under SDG 14.6, most countries have agreed to phase out subsidies that fuel IUU fishing, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. I also want to flag the issue of abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear, which is basically adding the added impact of plastic pollution on ocean health. So it's adding insult to injury. And finally, this is very much the perspective of the World Bank. I would like to say that we are focusing on, yes, we understand that there is a path to transition to sustainability. And that means, for instance, reducing overcapacity. But that means that there's going to be a social cost for fishermen who may be phased out of the industry. And that is something that the bank wants to focus on, because that's the best way to address the issue of overwhelming poverty in the sector.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. And I would like to ask all the panelists, after having answered my questions, please stay on the panel, because in the end, we will have the opportunity to also discuss some other issues. The beauty of video conferences is that we can move within a second from Washington, D.C. to Bella Italia, what we are going to do now. And I would like to introduce to you Nadia Binardi, the professor of oceanography from the University of Bologna. And since 2019, she's vice president of the Commission for Observation, Infrastructure, and Information Systems of WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. Nadia, ocean observation, data gathering, they are important pillars for monitoring and assessing the state of the ocean. So now, how should the European Union take a leading role in supporting coherent gatherings and assessments of ocean data to make informed governance decisions? What do you recommend?
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting forum. I would like to answer this question by referring to infrastructure and educational needs. Europe has now a leadership role in ocean monitoring and forecasting, because some years ago, it started a coherent action with Copernicus and EMONET programs and research infrastructure for data collection. They are nowadays the pillars of the ocean observing capacity and ocean forecasting capacity in Europe. Much more, however, is needed in the next 10 years in this direction. It is mandatory that the general European observing capacity will convey the data to this European ocean assembling production infrastructure. Based mainly on Copernicus and EMONET, hopefully other components, as well as tackle the unsolved problems of coastal monitoring not yet adequately addressed. The way forward, I would say in 3 points. The first is strengthen the Copernicus and EMONET infrastructure in the next years, converge the research and institutional data gathering efforts toward this efficient European infrastructure that makes available with international standards open and free data, produces new products such as forecast of the marine ecosystem and more. The second point, support the development of integrated data based upon the merging of new observations and new digital representation of the oceans, models, predictions, forecasting, what-if scenarios in support of knowledge and innovation. And third, develop the adequate training and education on these matters. Research and education from now on should go more and more hand in hand, spreading a transdisciplinary culture for the ocean environment, focusing on a young generation of scientists and entrepreneurs capable to deal with typically cross-borders environment, climate, and pollution problems. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nadia. I have to say I have high respect of what you data guys are doing with monitoring and evaluation. And we all know that we are currently in the UN Decade for Ocean Science. And one of the objectives of this UN Decade for Ocean Science is to make ocean knowledge more accessible for society, policymaking, and people like me. So what approaches should be taken to translate available ocean knowledge into action, and how to support inclusive and equitable interfaces between science, society, and policymaking, the transdisciplinary approach? What would you propose?
Okay, so thank you again. Let me first of all, remind us that the UN Decade of the Ocean for Ocean Science will underpin the science required for several outcomes: a clean ocean, a healthy and resilient ocean, a productive ocean, a predicted ocean, a safe ocean, an accessible ocean, and an inspiring and engaging ocean. These outcomes align very well with the priorities for EU action from the International Ocean Governance Forum, which you just illustrated to us. Europe is in the position to greatly contribute to all UN Decade outcomes by reinforcing the infrastructure, Copernicus and EMONET and more efforts, and properly connecting them to the research, development, and innovation actions. Europe is leading worldwide the new paradigm of science that revolve around the development of a complex research to operation and operation to research infrastructure. This infrastructure is the only one that can support the new data science of artificial intelligence, the protection of the ocean and the blue economy, as well as an equitable approach to interface science, society, and policy making. The new paradigm of data science needs to be fed by large alive archives of data, accessible, interoperable, and updated regularly. The UN decade should help us in Europe to make a large step in this direction. Copernicus and EMONET services have started to address very successfully the new paradigm of ocean science. So let me talk briefly about this new paradigm. First, operations should serve research. This requires observation and model data to be produced with high standards and made accessible and discoverable. The example is what happened with the IPCC community. Large archives of data were made available with international standards, and they are accessible to everybody. The second, research to operations should be fostered. All data produced by Horizon Europe research infrastructure programs should be converging on a large assembly, the large assembling data initiatives like Copernicus and EMONET that should be made effective to this goal. So this is research to operations. We are a bit weaker on that. Furthermore, new technologies should continuously feed European assembly centers. Conclude, it is my understanding that the next decade will implement a global transformative process for building the operation to research and research to operations. Infrastructure for the oceans. We don't have that. And so Europe, by its continuous support actions on Copernicus and EMONET, plus other initiatives, will contribute to this new products and new transformative science that the decade is fostering. Thank you. Sorry for taking too long.
Thanks a lot, Nina, for introducing also artificial intelligence as a tool for taking action. And this fits very well, because I now want to talk about action and want to introduce Jakob Granit, the Director General of the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, and he's chair of the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CAMLR. Jakob, more and more states are signing up to a global target of protecting at least 30% of the ocean by 2030 as marine protected areas. And John Kerry, in his video message, made a reference to action to be taken. What action in ocean governance are needed to deliver coherent and well-managed networks of marine protected areas over the next 10 years? And how could, again, the European Union best support this global effort?
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. And first of all, I'm very glad to be able to share my perspectives on ocean challenges and responses in relation to the IOG Forum's very rich set of recommendations, actually. Are we staying the right course? So as you noted, I bring two perspectives today. On the one hand, as a Director General of the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, and we focus, of course, much of our work on the Baltic Sea, Skagerrak and the North Sea, including freshwater management in the land system. And also on the other hand, and as the chair of the Conservation for the Antarctic Marine Living Resources, CAMLR, addressing then the Southern Ocean aspects. And the EU is, of course, a member of CAMLR, as you all recall. So these recommendations for EU action stresses some very important pathways to achieve the proposed target of at least 30% protected as marine areas. And these recommendations include leading by example, acting as a driving force in international negotiations for and processes, exploring and supporting innovative governance approaches that overcome silos, which is the holistic approach that my colleagues previously spoke about, and supporting science-based knowledge generation for decision-making, which was very clearly articulated by the last speaker. So with these two perspectives today, I found it particularly important to consider the EU's work on ocean government and management in EU's own marine space as a starting point for bringing value to the international ocean governance dialogue. And that is actually leading by example. So let me provide 4 aspects to consider moving forward with these recommendations. The first point is on marine spatial planning. And a key stepping stone would be, from my perspective, to take the EU's marine spatial planning framework as a starting point. All member states will have marine spatial plans in place this spring, according to Marine Spatial Planning Framework Directive. And this MSP framework provides a very solid framework for restoration of our ocean space, conservation using marine protected areas as a tool, and use through, for example, fishing, shipping, mining, and other marine use areas such as defense. And all of this applying an ecosystem-based management practice. The MSP framework is also the tool in which strategic environmental impact assessments can and is used today. For example, in relation to establishment of offshore wind farms or navigation, which essentially meets then the blue economy goals. And the MSP national frameworks also provides the basis for what I think is very important here, which is the political dialogue on how to use our shared ocean space by creating an opportunity for a more coherent marine planning framework, also across borders in our own EU waters. So within this marine spatial planning process, we have developed a lot of knowledge of stakeholder-driven planning. Our tools are now being used internationally within, for example, the International Oceanographic Commission, IOC, UNESCO, planning frameworks, and also in bilateral cooperation with third countries. So this is really my first point, addressing the MSP opportunities to bring in protection. The second point is on fishing. And within the EU, we have, for example, still significant aspects of addressing sustainable fishing practices in line with the common fishery policy framework. And this includes, as an example, how we manage migratory fish species in our EU waters and how those management aspects also relate to the national fishery regulatory frameworks that are managing in conjunction. And science-based evidence for political decision-making in the fishery area is a key area of importance. And also that it takes a real proper ecosystem approach. So how we establish fishing quotas and ensure that they're underpinned by real science, which is robust and transparent, is critical. A third point in this area is how we also manage our coastal areas. And this is an area of work that EU needs to further emphasize, addressing the degradation of the coastal zones in the EU space. And in particular, this is related to EU management frameworks, for example, the EU Water Framework Directive and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, how they overlap and how they also could be better integrated. There are some very good examples of many member states addressing this, but there are also many gaps. And finally, as the fourth point, I think it's very, very important that we understand the political economy of this. So in ocean governance, it's very critical to invest in and better understand the political economic aspects of cooperation. So this means a better understanding of the two dimensions. On the one hand, sustainable use of natural resources, and on the other hand, the need for protection and conservation, how these go hand in hand. So I believe EU need to do this in our own ocean space in order to have credibility to bring these issues into broader international governance domain. So leading by example. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jakob. You were referring to the shared ocean space. Mm-hmm. Let me come back to it. Given the transboundary nature of the ocean marine regional cooperation, one of the key avenues is to improve conservation and sustainable use in a transboundary way. What is needed to enhance existing regional cooperation or to create new moves for cross-sectoral collaboration? And again, what do you expect the European Union to do to support such endeavors?
Thank you. Again, a very broad question, obviously. So let me pick on.
You have 2 minutes, Jakob.
Yes, I have 2 minutes. I'll try in 2 minutes. And I think there are some good pathways here recommended. One is developing capacity and the other one is strengthening and building partnerships. So if we look at those two aspects on developing capacity, in this area, I think it's very important to that EU support in enhancing knowledge on the airspace national jurisdiction in general, and ocean governance also in general. That is, how do we manage a public good? Developing capacity also relates to how EU can support flag states and coastal states and port states to implement existing rights and obligations under UNCLOS and other relevant instruments, with a particular focus then on marine protected environments. And as we also heard from our colleague Pinardi, Dr. Pinardi, the work on enabling shared information systems will be very, very important here, based on trustworthy science-based data from all parts of the world. And EU is clearly in a unique position to support in that, as we have heard. And on the second recommendation of strengthening and building partnerships, also the importance here is to support these regional fisheries management organizations. And Kamilar is an example of an important one, which is not only fishing, it's also marine protection, and it's also set within a much broader Antarctic Treaty System, which is supporting peace and science as a coherent practice. So, but all of those organizations need support and needs to be strengthened. And another very interesting example noted here is how EU can lead also in line with the EU Green Deal, and especially how we can address the topic of nationally determined contributions and see how we tackle the blue tools in that. And I think that was a very innovative proposal that EU can develop on. And finally, again, in order to really make robust planning, I think that my points earlier on MSP is very, very important, and EU has some very, very strong knowledge on these areas. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jakob. We continue our journey. We have started in Europe, went to DC, from DC to Italy, from Italy to Sweden, and now we're going to West Africa. It is my pleasure to introduce to you and invite to the floor Dr. Amadou Dal, Pescao team leader from ECOWAS. You know, ECOWAS is the Economic Community of West African States, and ECOWAS and the European Union have already taken steps to collaborate for better ocean governance, such as joint policy platforms for fisheries management. Amadou, what types of partnerships are essential to tackle common challenges, and what are the mechanisms that are needed to make such efforts effective?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to extend the greetings of the Commissioner for Agri of ECOWAS, Mr. Sekou Sankare. Yes, and for his not being able to participate at this very important meeting. As you said rightly, EU and ECOWAS has a very dynamic and very comprehensive cooperation. I can say that 4 or 5 years ago, EU have funded 2 big programs. One is first that work on enhancing the contribution of fish as food in food security and nutrition in the region that is really facing a lot of drought, a lot of insecurity. And we have at the end of this program a very good document on the diagnostic of the pertinence of the different policies that have been implemented so far by the different nations. And with the Pescao, it is really very good to have this blueprint. We have a comprehensive strategic framework for sustainable fisheries and aquaculture development, which is totally in line with what we have seen on the recommendation of your working group. The comprehensive strategic framework for sustainable fisheries and aquaculture development have helped the countries to look at developing market-oriented aquaculture, assure human development, institutional strengthening, fisheries management, and helping women and youth to get decent job and not to be left out. And also, we have a lot of cases of IUU in our region. Now, directly to the question, EU and partner and ECOWAS have to build through partnership to achieving, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, particularly in the SDG 13 and 14 that is of big interest to us. A prosperous ECOWAS would provide new opportunities for investment and more varied imports and a supply of skilled new workers. EU to offer ECOWAS a true development partnership that is mutually beneficial for many ECOWAS countries. The EU and its member states are already major partners in aid, security, finance, trade, adapting and innovating its development cooperation to respond to new challenges such as climate change. Fragility is needed. Following the specific policies areas important for ECOWAS as follows. We have finance, trade, health, agriculture, of course, livestock, fisheries, and market-oriented aquaculture, development of climate change resilience, peace and security. In order to make this happen, the European Union and ECOWAS should together clarify the strategic objective of programs. Focus on the need of ECOWAS should be bottom-up through clear project selection criteria, provide demand-driven technical assistance and operationalize policy dialogue to improve the ocean governance sector, which is really needed in this region. We are very feeble and we need this cooperation to have. And we know that EU is cooperating in the case of maritime security. We have a lot of warships to help the Gulf of Guinea, which is really suffering a lot from the insecurity in the region. So again, from ECOWAS, we are very happy with the cooperation with EU, and then it is built on trust, and we wish that will develop in the coming years. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Amadou. We have received in the beginning a video message of John Kerry, the US Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. So I would like to come back to climate change, the climate crisis. The climate crisis will have a tremendous effect on the ocean, including on fisheries, and these impacts are unevenly distributed across marine regions. How could fisheries, that's my question, how could fisheries management and ocean governance more broadly respond to this challenge? And what should be the priorities for the European Union, also working in partnership with affected regions? What would you recommend?
Thank you so much. I think first is accelerating the climate change adaptation implementation in fisheries management throughout the world, and particularly in West Africa, because we have many coastal countries. They are very vulnerable to climate change. Of course, introducing flexibility in fisheries management cycle in order to foster adaptation, strengthening the resilience in fisheries, reduce their vulnerability to climate change, and enable managers to respond in a timely manner to the projected changes in the dynamic of maritime resources and ecosystem. Of course, good practices for climate adaptive fisheries management that have proven their effectiveness and can be adapted to different contexts, providing a range of options for stakeholders, including the fish industry, the small-scale fisheries, fishery management, policymakers, and also involved in the decision makers should be together. We have to have an inclusive cooperation with EU, with the different partners and actors in the African region. In this line, we can say that through FishGov that have been funded by EU, give opportunity to the small-scale fishermen to have their platform. The platform of the non-state actors would have been strengthened, and they can now contribute to the co-management and understand what is climate adaptation and mitigation, so to increase resilience in the region. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Amadou, for presenting the perspective of ECOWAS. We have now 5 more minutes for this panel, and I would like to ask all the panelists 1 minute to express what is your personal priority the European Union should put in the new strategy. And I want to remind you and us that the Commissioner has announced that the European Union is going to update their strategy. So now you have 1 wish in 1 minute, and I would like to start in the order we have started with Sigrid, and then Charlotte, over to you. 1 minute, Charlotte. What is your personal priority for the European Union to put into the strategy?
Well, the IOG Forum recommendations already cover a number of very important elements. A clean and healthy ocean is critical to human life and climate regulation, and no country can achieve this on its own. I agree that the EU should lead by example. I would, however, specify recommendation 1. Concretely, the EU and its member states should also pursue efforts for a global strategy to phase out fossil fuels and the implementation of a ship speed reduction regime. Also, the EU should act as a driving force in international negotiations, including for the BBNJ instrument. The subpoint of recommendation 1 on EIAs could be more specific and highlight the need to support globally consistent, uniform, and effects-based impact assessments. Our time is running out, so we must take concrete action.
Thanks a lot, Sigrid. Perfect. And you have set a standard for all the other panelists also to stay within 1 minute. Charlotte, what do you want to set as a personal priority for the European Union?
Goodness me, the pressure's on. I'm going to cheat a little bit, Alexander, because what's a game without cheating? I'm going to give you 3. I just want to echo what Dr. Tal said about climate change. Climate change is basically removing the buffer that we used to have on fisheries. The idea that you stop fishing and the stocks recover with climate change and migration of species, that buffer is going to disappear. So urgency of climate change. Number 2, I want to echo what Jacob said about MSP, marine spatial planning. This is an area of strength for the European Union. The EU has led the way on this, and we need to carry on in this focus. And then wrapping all this, we need more leadership on the part of the EU. The EU is an exceptional player in the ocean arena, and the idea is to keep leading and not selecting one aspect over others. So lead on the road to integration. I think I'm under a minute.
You have been under a minute, and you had 3 priorities, Charlotte. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Nadia. What should be, from your perspective, priority of the European Union in updating the strategy? You can wish as many things you want as long as you stay within 1 minute.
I think I will be shorter this time. So, well, it was clear from what I said before, and I still maintain this, following a little bit Charlotte push in the leadership. We are leader in open science and in developing a open and free data infrastructure that will make possible to deal with the monitoring and forecasting climate change and its consequences for the human population. So we should continue this, building on the success of Copernicus and EMBERNet. We should further advance, we should interface the oceans more with this idea of a serving infrastructure with open and free data, fostering new science, artificial intelligence, etc., etc. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Nina. Jakob, your minute is starting now.
Thank you so much. As you heard, I think policy and legislation here is key, and the pathway leading by example, I think, is one of the most important. And to tackle this ongoing ocean crisis, a holistic approach is necessary. So my recommendation would be to try to address the fragmented governance and management framework that we do still have within the EU, and try to bring this better together. And I made some earlier examples of this. And also in my own country, Multi-Party Commission has also looked at this from the perspective of bringing it together, and has actually proposed now an ocean law for Sweden, similar to our climate law, which I know could be also of interest for the EU to try to put something like that together, bringing the pieces together. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Jakob Amadou.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, first, of course, we have the climate change mitigation and adaptation so we can increase the resilience is very important for us. Supporting governance also, which is one of the big problems that we have in West Africa. Investment also is a joint venture or whatever to make sure that we can reap maximum benefit without harming the ocean and the resources. Combating the illegal fishing, you know, this West Africa is losing $2 billion because of the IUU, and strengthening, of course, the monitoring, surveillance, and control systems that we have, and assisting also on the conservation and restoration of resources and the ecosystems. This is something, one of the priority, and we would like to have more assistance on the EEF, ecosystem approach to fisheries, and the development of MPAs. This can help to reduce the problems of our coastal countries. Thank you so much for inviting us again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all the panelists for being very precise, for spreading lots of ideas, for providing lots of input for the new strategy of the European Union, and especially for making my life very easy, because you all stayed within the time allocated to you. Thanks a lot. It was a great experience. Thanks a lot. It's now my pleasure to go to the next panel. The next panel is called the European Union's All Crew on Deck approach. And it's my pleasure to introduce the crew of the European Union dealing with international ocean governance to you. And we have 6 participants now in the next panel. And I would like to start with Karolina Vycheva. You have already seen and listened to her in the opening session. She has welcomed us. She is the Director General, Directorate for Maritime Affairs and Fisheries. Veronica Manfredi, Director Quality of Life in the Directorate in the DG for Environment. To be followed by Con Deuns, the Director General in the DG for International Partnerships. And we have the Director John Bell from the Directorate Healthy Planet. Matthias Petschke, Director Space Directorate, DG for Defense Industry and Space. And last but not least, Magda Kopczycka, Director Waterborne, Director General for Mobility and Transport. And I'm going to follow the same approach as we have done so far. I will call one speaker after the other to the floor and raise 2 or 3 questions. And we have around 40 minutes in order to answer all these questions. So thank you for having taken the time. Thank you for being here. And I would like to start with Karolina Vycheva. You know her already. And I would like to raise the question, what are the main areas of transformation that the European Union and its member states need to pursue through its international ocean governance agenda? And how can they provide solutions to global challenges? Let's remind you, we only have 2 minutes for answering the question. Karolina, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexander, and you're doing an excellent job. Let me start from the past, when in 2016, we have started with the Ocean Governance Agenda. And at that time, we were already convinced that to ensure ocean sustainability, we need a joint effort, and that effort should be built on multilateralism, on rule-based international order, and we were convinced also that we need to follow an integrated approach. This approach should bring together all aspects of ocean use, knowledge, protection, and restoration. And that has not changed since 2016, and I'm particularly glad that my dear colleagues are joining us today in this panel to think together. I'm also happy to have also the Minister of the Portuguese Presidency, Minister Sorao Santos, sharing the Member States' view. And we are really convinced that we need all hands on deck to turn the tide. We've been talking about today about various challenges and priorities like climate change addressing, pollution, ecosystem conservation, restoration and sustainable use of marine resources, sustainable development of blue economy sectors, strengthening the knowledge base and its link to policy making. These are the priorities that come out most strongly in the recommendations. And we fully agree with this list. We absolutely share those priorities. And to achieve them, we need a general and profound transformation towards sustainability. So this is the key word, how to achieve this transformation to sustainability. On climate change, I would say that oceans and climate are in a virtuous cycle or circle. This has been highlighted a couple of times before me. Talking about solutions in this respect, nature-based solutions support climate and ocean protection. So how to achieve the sustainability transformation? One of the solutions is to use nature-based solutions. Needless to say, we stand ready in the European Commission to turn such solutions into reality. And it's not only within EU, but also beyond our borders. And I'm sure that Koen is going to talk about that. Another area, I'm just giving examples, is sea level rise, which is an overlap between the oceans and climate change. And there it is absolutely crucial to increase our knowledge on the projections and scenarios, on the impacts of the sea level rise, and also on designing mitigation and adaptation measures for the different impacts to be addressed. And this, of course, needs an increase of knowledge. And there, I would use one of the previous interventions to say that the real transformation is to switch from research to operation and from operation to research. So we absolutely need the enabling power of the smart solutions coming from innovation and research. I'm sure John is going to come back on that. And in order to address all these high-level challenges, we need a transformation to a higher level of resilience. So these are probably the big headlines that I see in terms of transformation. I would like to cover also two more aspects, and I will come to biodiversity because this is a recent, very, very high political determination expressed by the Commission. And our objective is to have a huge leap to recovery by 2030. Our commitment does not stop at the European border. Many speakers talked about the MPAs that we initiated in the Antarctica. So these are solutions to how act and achieve our goals in the area of biodiversity. Last but not least, sustainable blue economy. We will have a new communication that will be launched next month, exactly on how to transform our blue economy into a sustainable blue economy and how it can provide a great source of new solutions to decarbonization, zero pollution, circularity, and biodiversity. I will stop here.
Thanks a lot. Let me follow up. In the previous panel, maritime spatial planning has been mentioned. Do you think that international marine or maritime spatial planning will or should happen also in areas beyond national jurisdiction? Might also be a diplomatically difficult question.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. Actually, in the last 2 decades, increased demand for resources, but also the technological advancement and progress and improved scientific knowledge had resulted in increased interest in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Previously, everything was enclosed in our own waters. This expansion of human activities in the high seas has quickly overtaken developments in international governance of oceans. This is all based on the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Actually, efforts to conserve and sustainably use marine resources have until now mostly concentrated on waters under national jurisdiction, but with this new trend, we have to go beyond. We have to. I have to note still that there is quite a positive evolution with what we have achieved in the national jurisdictions. We should not forget that seas and oceans, however, and their ecosystems are highly interconnected in huge ecological system, and they do not respect legal boundaries. So it's not only the expansion of human activity, but the fact that everything is so much interlinked biologically, chemically, and materially, actually obliges us to go beyond our national jurisdictions. For that, we need maritime spatial planning at national level goes further. And in some sectors, I have to say that there are very promising steps. And this international coordination has been well achieved in areas beyond national jurisdiction. And this is in line actually with the obligation of UNCLOS. I will give immediately an example on fisheries because this is one of the huge pillars in my DG, Common Fisheries Policy. And actually in this respect, we have quite a good record of managing and conserving shared resources in areas beyond the national jurisdiction. We also have another example like the marine protected areas. We have a couple of good examples there. I'm not going to go into that. So there are a number of building blocks on which we can extend our efforts. The ongoing negotiations for the new international legally binding instrument on marine biodiversity, many speakers refer to that, the BBNJ instrument presents the countries with a once-in-a-life opportunity to lay the ground for more effective cooperation among the countries and contracting parties through common purpose, shared obligations and principles. This is actually the key of our effort for this year, and I would really like to see the BBNJ instrument facilitating this effort, having a successful outcome still this year. I'm absolutely convinced that only through systemic use of strategic environmental assessments and environment impact assessments when implementing area-based management tools, only through this we can really achieve sustained sustainability.
Thanks a lot. As announced, I wanted to start with 2 questions to everybody and then in the end come back to another round of questions and answers. Thanks a lot. I would like now to ask Veronica Manfredi to take the floor. Veronica is the Director for Quality of Life in DG Environment, and this directorate plays a very important role in leading Europe towards a zero pollution ambition and contributes to tackle climate and biodiversity crisis. So one of the main aims in ocean conservation is to develop networks of marine protected areas. If properly designed and good and well managed, they are an important tool for climate change response, biodiversity restoration, and support the blue economy. What ocean governance is needed to foster the creation of such networks, and how can the European Union help to ensure that these steps are really achieved? And how do we ensure that these networks of MPAs is fit for purpose given the changes in oceans due to climate change? A long question and a difficult question, and you have 3 minutes to answer it.
Thank you very much, and many, many thanks for having me here. I'm really honored. Well, indeed, it is a difficult question, and yet a question that calls to relatively simple answer in a forum like this one, which has been debating throughout those hours about the importance of strong governance. I would say, first of all, clarity of vision. Why do we need marine protected areas? Because, as you said yourself, the climate change impacts are so important. We know for a fact that unless we change course of action, we are going to face dramatic impacts on our own survival. So a marine protected area is one of the important instruments to try and relent and also make us as mankind stronger against the very, very dangerous impacts that we can expect from the ongoing sea level rise, acidification, warming, destruction of our coral reef, which is a natural barrier. So why do we need these marine protected areas? I would really argue, first of all, for the survival of mankind. Secondly, because we know that only by restoring nature properly, we will also see a lot of positive impacts in terms of better well-being, productivity, resilience of the oceans, exactly the goals which the international ocean governance is giving to itself and to which we fully abide. So for us, what is essential to go there is indeed having a vision, and the vision has been set in the European Union when we have adopted the biodiversity strategy. You can count on the EU to be fully committed during the COP15, which is upcoming in October, to be really a very determined leader in trying to secure commitment from other international partners towards the goals of, for example, managing to achieve indeed an effective protection of at least 30% of our seas by 2030. I was very pleased to hear the statement from the Special Envoy John Kerry going exactly into this same direction. We do believe that the other important alliance to be made is with all other international organizations that are committed to work on solving governance issues, like, for example, the IMO. I'm very happy to have all the colleagues like Magda with us in the panel, because today there are plenty of opportunities for, at the same time, developing solutions that address both greenhouse gases, so decarbonization, and the pollution challenges. So I would stop it there and give the space for further discussion, because I think this is just the beginning.
Thanks a lot, Veronica. I would like to come back to an issue which has been mentioned before from different speakers. Millions of tons of plastic waste find their way into the oceans every day. A new solution promoted by many states is the development of a new global agreement to combat marine plastic pollution. How could the European Union lead by example and advance circular approaches that reach beyond the scope of what is usually considered to be part of ocean governance? So how could such a global agreement complement the existing initiatives, for example, at the regional level? Is there a polluter pays principle, as discussed and decided in Rio several years ago, that can be enacted for plastic waste in the world's oceans? Back to you, Veronica.
Let me start from your last question. The polluter pays principle is a founding principle of the treaty. So, of course, crucially important within the EU context. Yet, you can expect the European Union, that is now finalizing in these hours, indeed, its own zero pollution action plan, to insist on a better resort to the polluter pays principle also in wider international negotiation, of course, within the limits of its own competence, But I think it is important that we move together towards a logic of better tackling pollution at source. This is also the reply to your question about plastic pollution, which for how catastrophic it is unfortunately only the visible part of pollution. What we know today is that out of pollution, only in the European Union, which is a rather advanced continent with a rather robust regulatory framework in terms of pollution prevention, we still witness every year around 1 in 8 deaths due to pollution as such, with chemical pollution, amongst others, playing a very important role. So plastic pollution is, I would dare say, even just the symbol of the level of contamination of our seas, and something that calls for indeed strong action. What can we do together? Well, first of all, this year is also, next year is the year of UNEA 5, where we will have a very important diplomatic opportunity for indeed making step forwards a global plastic agreement. Because today we don't have a global framework for tackling pollution at source. Within the EU, the efforts are going full speed ahead. You know that our co-legislators have adopted in less than 6 months a very important directive on single-use plastic just a couple of years ago. We are supporting its implementation, and even that piece of law is just a piece in a much broader puzzle of actions that we are taking, working together with the colleagues in the European Chemical Agency, for example, to tackle microplastic at source in the textile, in the cosmetic sector, to mention at least, following microplastic throughout their pathways. We will have an important review of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, for example, this year, to prevent microplastic entering into our seas. So I would say we are really committed in preventing this phenomenon to happen across the European Union at best. It will require societal change, and this is where we want to engage with the many actions that you will soon see published in the Zero Pollution Action Plan that imply a lot of societal engagement actions as well, cooperation with cities, with ports, and close cooperation, of course, with the colleagues across the European Union that are helping us through the devoted missions under Horizon Europe, the good implementation of all the related strategies, farm to fork, smart and sustainable mobility, the renovation way, everything counts to avoid that what happens on land ends up in our oceans.
Thanks a lot, Veronica. Dear participants, I had introduced this panel as the European Union's all-crew on deck approach. And I'm happy to introduce now to you the Director General for International Partnerships at the European Commission, Koen Deuns. He is DG since October 2019. He joined the Commission in 2004. And ocean governance is all about partnerships. It's all about working together. And therefore, I'm going to raise the question to him. International cooperation and partnerships are at the heart of ocean governance, and one of the main instruments of the European Union is to contribute to ocean sustainability beyond its borders. So my question, how to best support countries in strengthening the social and environmental performance of fisheries management? You also have 2 to 3 minutes for answering this question.
Well, thanks a lot. And I mean, first of all, very happy to be part of this crew on deck. It's an exciting trip, and as you said, how to work with partners, because partnerships is key if we want to move some of the things we've set out to do. And I think that the starting point is always practice what you preach. And I think that Veronica and Charlina have already set out how, as part of our European Green Deal ambition, the whole societal, economic, transformative change that we're operating, that we are trying to lead by example. But that's, of course, not enough. It's only a starting point. And it's a starting point for working with partners to basically work with them, convince them to build the necessary, let's say, domestic ownership and leadership on an agenda. This is not something on which on which you can push people around. This is something that can only move precisely because of the transformative aspect and societal impact it has, that can only move if there's a real domestic ownership and agenda behind it in our partner countries. And there are a number of things that we see that should be pursued. I mean, first of all, the starting point is, of course, what we call with a horrible word, the holistic approach. It's basically about making sure that we don't create false choices, trade-offs, dichotomies between, am I now saving the planet or the people or prosperity? We need to build an agenda that is based on the whole synergies between biodiversity conservation, food security, nutrition, livelihoods, environmental sustainability, and so on. So these are not trade-offs. This is part and parcel of the same package, and we can only properly advance if we advance on all elements of this package. If we don't, then somehow we're not going to walk, we're going to limp. And that's the first important message on the basis of which we work. The second one is, of course, that it's key, really key, to have a solid governance system in place. I think that one of the biggest challenges still is the challenge of proper management. And what we see, one of the big issues is the inadequate management around it. That in itself has a number of dimensions. First one is, of course, the scientific one. Building a solid scientific evidence base to support decision-making, working on data collection, data sharing, working on that basis on the development of management plans, supporting regional organizations to do that. This is one key element in order to have a proper governance system in place. The second one is, of course, that when you design all this, you need an inclusive process. It needs to be designed involving stakeholders, consulting, coastal communities, small scale fishers, and so on, because if not, the kind of management system you design will not be properly supported. And the third element is, of course, the strengthening of capacities, of capabilities, really to monitor and to combat, notably illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries. So these are different elements on which we want to work with partners as to put in place, build up a solid management system. The third big element then is of course the whole legal setting, and Shalina has referred to the UN biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction negotiations, which indeed we hope to land on a solid result, because it's the embedding of all of this in a proper multilateral rules-based order that is essential. But it's not just the multilateral part. I mean, we've worked over the past 2.5 years very intensively on negotiating a new agreement with our partners of the Caribbean, Africa, and the Pacific, the so-called agreement with the ACP group of states, the post-Cotonou agreement. And in those negotiations, which we've now initialed last week and which lead to a legally binding treaty, strong commitments have been taken up precisely on these issues, including the restoration and protection of ecosystems, conservation, sustainable management of marine resources, and so on. So there's the whole legal angle to it, which is fundamental, which brings me to my final point, which is, of course, if you want to do all that, you need money, you need funding to support it, and there we can no longer overplay the importance of ODA, of official development aid. It's basically dwarfed by all kinds of other financial resources, but ODA still has a fundamental role to play as a catalyst to mobilize funding, but also a catalyst to do the kind of capacity building assistance that we've just been talking about. In our new financial instrument called Global Europe, the one we are now programming for the next 7 years, has, compared to the previous cycle, a significantly higher target for action related to climate change, the environment, and so on. And I see that we will definitely mobilize more funding that we did in the past, precisely on supporting partners to live up to those big challenges we all commonly face in when it comes to the oceans, biodiversity, and ocean governance.
Thanks a lot for providing an insight in what is in the package international partnership has to deal with. I would like to come up with a maybe difficult question and would like to ask you to answer it in 1 or 2 minutes. How can the European Union ensure that the international cooperation is not perceived, and I say perceived, as colonial science, where scientists and policymakers from the European Union, from the global north, come to suggest what science is needed, bring in the scientists to collect the data, and then never return to enhance in the country's science provision? So how can we really work in full partnership? I know it's diplomatically maybe challenging, but I think that's an important question to be answered.
Well, it is an important question indeed, because it's definitely a perception we would we hope will not arise, and if it does, we certainly want to combat, because I don't think that, honestly speaking, that something like colonial science can exist. I think that good policy making in these times, in the 21st century, I mean, is based on a robust evidence base, on solid science, and I think that without it, we cannot really take informed decisions. So I think that there's no intention at all to impose science. Starting point is rather, how can we come to solid, informed decision making? And by the way, the name change that my DG has undergone from development cooperation to international partnerships captures precisely that. This is about building partnerships. And that we do in practice, because ultimately the question then arises of local capacity. And we are working with partner countries at bilateral, especially also at regional level, to do just that. And I could quote you or cite you a number of very concrete programs. I mean, in Eastern, Southern Africa and the Indian Ocean, we have the EcoFish program, where precisely we work with the regional organizations to improve data collection, scientific advice, and then the development of the management plans. That's not something we do as Europeans in Brussels. It's something we do very much with local partners. Another example is the whole the work we do under the Biomappa program, where we have really supported the establishment of a series of regional observatories for protected areas and biodiversity, which is managed by regional institutions. So what we do is basically capacity building and working with the regional bodies, with the regional partners, precisely to work on data, on science, and subsequently the design of the necessary management program. So it's really a co-creation effort on which we mobilize our fund.
Thanks a lot for this very clear and strong statement, and also telling us that change of the name is more than only changing the name. It's also a change in the direction. I like the word co-creation. Thanks a lot. I'm now going over to John Bell. He's the director in the Directorate of Healthy Planet. And I'm going to talk to him about how international ocean governance can be successful if it's based on informed decision-making and using the best available knowledge, while at the same time applying the precautionary principles to deal with uncertainty. Precautionary principles, again, one of the RIO principles. So how could the European Union lead the way in developing a strong knowledge base to support international ocean governance? John, thanks a lot for joining us and for being available on such a short notice.
Thanks, Alexander, and good to see everybody keeping in such good shape under these conditions. So I think the starting point is to understand from the research and science point of view, as Charlene pointed out, the relationship between what we know and how we govern has to become much more closely bridged. It is the strange reality that oceans, in fact, are the unacknowledged regulators of most of our planetary systems. They're the kind of the blind spot in the European Green Deal, in that, a bit like when we look at the Earth, we tend to overlook the blue bit, which is actually conditioning everything else. So I think this issue of governance is also putting oceans in their place, and understanding why good governance for all of us around the ocean is critical in terms of getting the destination. I think Veronica talked about having a clear vision from the outset. So for me, from the research innovation point of view, we need to do three things. So for governance, you need to understand what it is that you are governing and who you are governing and what the dynamics are. So research and innovation, first of all, has to turn the lights on in the ocean. And that means science and innovation in terms of understanding what is needed by that vision, what is needed for the destination point of governance, needs to provide the knowledge, the applications, the science, and the platforms to do the things that governance needs to do. So we need to understand what is happening with our ecosystems. How do we conserve them? How do we restore them? How do we renew them? We need to understand what is fit for purpose monitoring and observation for the biogeochemical flows that are there. We need to think about a system for the future. If you like, this is the first transition humankind has tried to make by design. So think about yourself knowing that the Industrial Revolution was taking place in 50 years' time. What would you need for it? Well, the first thing is you need street lighting. You need various other technologies to help you to make the changes that you want. So similarly, turning the lights on in the ocean for governance. We need to have effective mapping. We have absolutely no idea about the condition of most of the ocean. We need a form of deliberation that involves the peoples who live and depend around the ocean in its richer and its poorer parts to be part of that system. We need a fit for purpose observation system, if you like. This is kind of the basic infrastructure like street lighting that we need for the oceans for the future, that will become a basic infrastructure of public policy. We need to know how to do compliance together. We need to work with the interdependence that we have in partnerships to deliver common goods and benefits to the people around the ocean. A bit like the lesson of the European Union, the interdependence driving common benefits is a quicker way of sustaining common goods. We need to harness the data that's starting to come out of the ocean in a kind of an inner space program. We're going to have huge amounts of data coming out of the ocean. We need to decide what we need them for in terms of both prediction, forecasting, building the next economy, which will be based on our biological resources and the ability to valorize and share natural capital as part of the blue economy that Charlene was talking about. And we need the ability to manage risks. The ocean will also be the main driver of most of the systemic risks that we'll be facing. So the ability to model, to forecast, to predict, to price, I think these are things that need to be put in place, and they're not going to be put in place at the level of a scattering of interested gentlemanly projects. So the second thing is we need to set a direction for research and innovation to deliver this. And Horizon Europe, with its 95 billion building on Horizon 2020, cannot simply be an observer of the process of transition. It has to be a driver. And this is where we will be working to build interdependence through science diplomacy. We have it in every major sea basin. Even in the difficult ones like the Black Sea, scientists and researchers talk to each other. They don't colonize each other. We need to build multilateral alliances like the one that we're building at the moment. We have an all-Atlantic alliance of researchers, every country around the Atlantic from pole to pole, to pursue common understanding in terms of ecosystems, observation, and so forth. We need to build through science diplomacy the common means, because there's a lot of ground to cover in a short space of time. And we need to make them accessible to the people who need them most, which are mainly over in Kuhn's part of the partnership world. And the third thing we need mission thinking. We're talking about systemic changes, not incremental changes. We're talking about systemic risks. We're at tipping points, and you can agree or disagree with your kids who are coming to you, having watched Netflix documentaries, asking, what the hell are you doing, Dad, to fix this? And whatever your view is, what we're looking at is a systemic risk and is a need for systemic transition, the transformations that Charlene mentioned earlier on. Now, to do that, we have launched, under the guidance of Commissioners Sinkevicius and Gabriel, and with Pascal Lamy and a mission board, a mission to put us in the position to have the oceans and seas healthy and fit for restoration by 2030. It's led by Pascal Lamy and a team of distinguished people from across the world. And the Commission at the moment is working out what to do with this. But what we're talking about here is the 3030 vision that people are talking about. We can no longer go on hoping that we get there. We have to make it happen. We need to support the people who've put the legislation and the goals in place. We need to support the economic and social transformation. We need the knowledge and the solutions and the innovations to make the transitions happen on the ground. So this mission, if you like, it's based on the kind of the Apollo thinking of the 1960s. This is not a moonshot, it's an earth shot. It's not about outer space, it's about inner space. And what we're going to try and do there is focus on 5 things. Ecosystems restoration at scale, addressing the systemic pollution systems through the whole water system in different ways, and looking at how the water system as a whole, because the ocean, of course, is driving the entire water system, can address the challenges of climate. And to do that, and I'll stop here, governance as such and how we do governance in this space. How do you have deliberation as part of a long-term science-based transformation affecting so many people, and what kind of knowledge systems you need to have put in place? So there are 3 long ways of answering 3 questions, and I hope it gives you some food for thought.
Thanks a lot, John. I especially liked your description that we have to work on transition by design, and let me add, and not by coincidence. And therefore, thanks a lot for addressing the questions. I am happy now to ask Matthias Petschke to take the floor. I mentioned in the beginning that this is the European Union's all crew on deck approach. And Matthias Petschke is Director for Space at the European Commission, Directorate General for Defense, Industry and Space. So we do not only have all crew on board, but we also have someone from the orbit joining us. Matthias, the Copernicus program is a reference worldwide in Earth observation from space and committed since 2017 to the international ocean governance already. My question to you, how can the European Union and space-based services best support the full knowledge value chain, including ocean observation and knowledge creation, for example, in ABNJ, the Global South, and also at country scale? Matthias, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be with you this afternoon. Well, you are asking about Copernicus, so let me very briefly present Copernicus. It has already been mentioned before, but let's be a bit more specific on what Copernicus already does today. We are flying already 8 Sentinel satellites, that's the name of our satellites, and 20 should fly by 2030. 3 of those satellites are very much used for ocean monitoring. The increase of ocean levels has been mentioned earlier. We've just launched back in November an additional satellite, because we consider this to be a priority area. And this satellite, Michael Freilich, will deal specifically with these challenges. Then we operate operational public services like the Copernicus Marine Service, the Climate Change Service dealing with ocean forecasts or sea level rise again. And these are services based on ocean observation in situ and from space and analyzed through scientific models. And there will be further services in the future, most notably with the CO2 monitoring mission, which is currently under development. With these services, we are providing a bridge between science and policies, and we are delivering information on a daily and permanent basis. All our services are free of charge and open to all. As we say, full, free, and open. And we are committed to the international ocean governance since 2017. And we showcase each year for our ocean conferences, the availability and the value of our services for all, for the Arctic, for the global south, and all areas beyond national jurisdiction. Our next priority for 2030 is to continue launching satellites and improve the services, including also the ocean services. 6 new satellites are planned to fly by 25 to 28, with 2 to 3 satellites that will tackle the Arctic Ocean and water quality globally. And then the marine service should significantly improve to tackle upcoming challenges at the coasts, in the Arctic, and something new and immensely important, live ecosystems monitoring.
So, thanks a lot, Matthias. A very brief answer to the question, how will the new paradigm of the future European Union digital twin ocean, how will it support policy integration in delivering a sustainable ocean? And how will it work together with Copernicus, heavily in use internationally, so that we can enhance the monitoring and management of the oceans at world scale? Would be great if you could answer this question in 1 minute.
It's a new concept, the concept of EU digital twins, and the EU digital twin ocean is one of them. It is one of those digital twins currently developed by my colleagues from the Director General Connect. And the digital twin ocean is built in partnership with Copernicus, obviously, but also with 2 other key Commission services, DG RTD Research and DG Mara. The EU digital twin ocean is to create a virtual place where to play with scientific knowledge to tackle global challenges based on 3 key new ideas. First, create the place, set up an impressive computing power based on cloud and exascale high performance computing, and a big EU data lake, which is to a certain extent going to come from Copernicus. Second, build a comprehensive digital replication of the ocean behavior with a pool of models and artificial intelligence tools from oceanography to socioeconomics. And last but not least, propose a simulator, a place for co-creation, where people will be able to play with models and data and test some scenarios. For instance, what if the sea level rises by 6 millimeter instead of 3 millimeter per year along the coast somewhere here or there? So this gives you a bit of an idea what is going to happen with the digital twins. There will be close cooperation with Copernicus, and we believe that by closely cooperating, we will get even more out of Copernicus, and we will make the digital twin model even more powerful.
Thanks a lot. Now I have an idea what you are going to do with EU Digital Twin Ocean. Thanks a lot. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Magda Kopczynska, the Director for Waterborne Transport in the Directorate General for Mobility and Transport within the Commission. Her directorate is responsible for developing and following up on implementing policies in support of logistics, maritime transport, safety, and pollution from ships. And we all know that over 80% of the world merchandise trade by volume are carried by sea, and making maritime transport the backbone supporting international trade and globalization. European Union, a key player in maritime transport, is most important exporter at world level and the 2nd largest importer. So Magda, which mechanisms will the European Union mobilize to support a swift shift towards emission-free and pollution-free shipping? Swift, emission-free and pollution-free shipping, guided by ambitious time-bound greenhouse gas emission reduction targets? And how can we ensure that all ships retain their onboard waste so it is adequately disposed and treated in the harbors? I know, again, a difficult question, but the issue of pollution, all types of pollution, has been addressed several times so far. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and thank you for introducing the size and the scope of maritime transport, because with that you actually covered my opening sentence, so I've already gained 30 seconds, but not much more than that. I think the most important aspect to have at the back of our heads is that while we have a very, very clear policy line ahead at the EU level, we need to make sure that we do it in such a way that we also push and lead on developments at the international level. Let me just briefly talk about greenhouse gas emissions strategy for the EU and for the IMO. And I'm actually going to be using the same headlines explaining what's going to happen in both cases. We are often asked, whether EU should be coming with any measures related to shipping, whether we should not leave everything in the hands of IMO. But in the past and now, it's always been that sometimes we lead and IMO catches up, and sometimes it's the IMO that comes first and then we catch up, and in the end we succeed together. That was the case with, for example, the project to reduce sulfur contents of fuels, where the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, was first. With regards to greenhouse gas emissions, at the EU, we have a very clear target ahead that we need to reach: reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 55% in 2030 and carbon neutrality in 2050. In the IMO, we have the IMO strategy with the reduction of at least 50% by 2050, but also with a clear commitment to look and revise that strategy next in 2023. And everybody agrees that there is only one direction where this revision can go, and it's upwards towards a more ambitious strategy for decarbonization of shipping at the global level. But as shipping is so complex, we cannot really think about one specific singular measure that will do it. At the EU level, we'll be looking at carbon pricing in accordance with the announcement by the President and also with the European Green Deal. Shipping will be covered by emission trading scheme. The proposal to present the details is coming up in June. At the IMO, in June, we will see the first discussion about a global market-based measure. We will not yet know the details. We will not have finalization of the discussion. The discussions will really kick off in spring 2022. But the very fact that those discussions are starting 2 years earlier than even the most ambitious people suspected a couple of years ago is a very good indication of the commitment of the sector to decarbonize. We cannot decarbonize without alternative fuels. At the EU level, we'll be coming up with a proposal to push for an uptake of alternative fuels that will lead to nearly zero emission alternative fuels in shipping by 2050. We'll be doing the same, launching a discussion at IMO level. I think it's extremely important that we always have at the back of our heads this responsibility that we have as the EU. We need to lead in international debates, but leading means we bring others with us and not we just run ahead and then look back and see that we act on our own. You asked a question about waste, which is slightly different angle here, and maybe just one very short sentence. We came up with a revised legal framework 2 years ago to make sure that ships coming into EU ports have it easier to deliver their waste to ports instead of dumping it at sea. But I'm sure there are things that can be further pushed and developed at the international level. And I think here the partnerships that Kuhn was talking about, working with regions all over the world to either copy our solutions or come up with other ways of making sure that ships, when they are calling at ports worldwide, that they don't dump waste, but that they can deliver waste to proper waste processing plants available in those ports. I stop here because I know it's already beyond the time that you've envisaged. Thank you.
Thank you so much. But you were talking about responsibility, and really only 1 minute. We cannot stop this discussion without mentioning safety at sea and ethical treatment of workers. What can the European Union do to ensure that the European Union standards are used inside and outside European Union waters? Only 1 minute, but we have to talk about workers.
This is very unfair for a sector that carries between 80 and 90% of global trade, to only give me 1 minute. But on this one, we have always worked with International Maritime Organization and with International Labour Organization, because in shipping, unlike in any other sector, you always have international crew on board of every single ship. So we need to make sure that the standards are global. We have a stronger way to enforce them and very effective way of checking those standards. But if we don't have international system for the proper level of quality in terms of working and living conditions, in terms of training of seafarers, we'll never make it. That is why for that point in particular, we've always been very closely working with the two international organizations. And we are also embarking on regional discussions. A couple of weeks ago, I had a discussion with a group of ASEAN countries on how to promote and ratification and then improve the enforcement of Maritime Labour Convention, which is exactly about that, about the quality of living and working conditions of seafarers on board. But if we are talking about people in shipping, it must be a global approach. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this clear answer. And I have to apologize for the time pressure. It's always the inability of the moderator. And therefore, I apologize. And I would like to thank you all. In a normal meeting in pre-COVID times, I would ask the auditorium for a big round of applause for the European Union's crew working so very hard on international ocean governance. For me, it was a clear signal and a good indicator that the Commission is working together. Thank you all. And I would like to go over to the final session, where I have the pleasure to introduce Ricardo Serrao Santos, the Minister of Maritime Affairs from Portugal. Ricardo is the Portuguese Minister for Maritime Affairs since 2019. Before that, he was a member of the European Parliament, where he was a driving force on ocean governance, blue economy, and fisheries. He was also director of the Department of Oceanography, and he's a maritime scientist. And very important, he's representing here the European Union member states. Ricardo, thank you very much for being here, and you are delivering a keynote on the future ocean governance, a vision from Portugal, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And let me start by greeting the panel, and in particular our hosts, Commissioner Virginijus Sinkevicius and the Director General Charlina Viceva. But I would also say hello to Christine de Perron, who is speaking after me, and of course to you, Alexander Muller, as moderator, and everyone engaged in this forum. I don't know if John Bell is still there, but also particular greeting to John Bell. It's a long time no see. I hope to see you, John, one of these days. I like your new position. I know that in that healthy planet, you will understand how huge and important is the ocean. And before addressing the vision from Portugal, and given the nature of this forum in the international dimension of this agenda, I would like to briefly recall the significance of our present moment, which is ocean-wise, acknowledge some of the milestones of the last few years. First of all, the United Nations Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development that incorporates, and it is for the first time that an agenda on development and sustainable development incorporates an objective dedicated to the ocean, which is SDG 14. And also, I would like to refer to the important landmark that it is the European Green Deal. Secondly, the ongoing process of elaboration of an international legally binding instrument under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, which is a particular relevant process in the context of the Constitution of the Oceans, if I may say so, and the direct result of the Rio 20+20, the document, The Future We Want. Thirdly, the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development that was already referred here today. Let me also mention the regular process for global reporting and assessment of the state of the marine environment, including socioeconomic aspects, because the second World Ocean Assessment is precisely being launched tomorrow, and the third was already announced. And let me say how important this is, because only very recently, and I think in 2015 or 2016, the first World Ocean Assessment was produced. And the importance of the ocean for our planet, for our lives, is really state on this urgency to continue this these World Ocean Assessments one after the other. And all these markers, and I could add others, like the mission Starfish, dedicated to the ocean on the context of Horizon Europe, all these marks shape Portugal's visions for a future ocean governance, and shape also our vision for the Portuguese presidency. In this last dimension, our work is focused in two main areas. The Portuguese presidency. Fisheries linked to the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity, and the integrated maritime policy in connection with the importance of a sustainable blue economy, two of the priority areas of the International Ocean Governance Agenda. I would also mention the fifth thematic area of this agenda as a relevant topic of the Portuguese presidency, which is sustainable seafood. We continue to support a common fisheries policy where sustainability and equity for European fishing communities go hand in hand, always grounded on solid scientific knowledge. This means improving financing instruments and funds, effective monitoring, control and surveillance, including the current revision of the control regulation, but also a thoughtful consideration of what is the future of the EU fisheries policy. Portugal is also working closely with member states and the Commission to approve Council conclusions on integrated maritime policy dedicated to the blue economy, organized around 4 pillars: health, knowledge, prosperity, and social equity. Among these 4 pillars is precisely the importance of a sustainable blue economy to support Europe's recovery and prosperity. And let me add, a sustainable blue economy that is socially fair, equitable, and inclusive, in fact, aligned with the principles of the International Ocean Governance Agenda of fairness and equitability. In this context, I would also like to share some relevant events taking place in Portugal during this presidency. One is a fisheries ministerial meeting. The other is the Ministerial Conference on Integrated Maritime Policy, where international ocean governance will play a key role in the discussions, with the need for a blue agenda in the Green Deal to reinforce the process of economic and social recovery in the European Union. Addressing now our vision of a future ocean governance from a national perspective. It draws on all of these anchors, and is clearly set in the new strategy for the sea to promote a healthy ocean, enabling a sustainable economy, the well-being of Portuguese people, and the role of Portugal in ocean governance, strongly supported by scientific knowledge. In fact, the knowledge policy interface underlined in the International Ocean Agenda, Governance Agenda, is also a very significant part of Portugal's own policy making. To reach this vision, a transformative process needs to take place in our economy. We need a digital, decarbonized circular economy, one where resources, efficiency, and ecosystem regeneration play a vital role. This shift is critical in international ocean governance, but also when shaping our national policies and specifically our national strategy for the sea. We detail very concrete measures, around 180, that will drive to 2030 our time frame. As said, the strategy is anchored on the United Nations 2030 agenda and on the Green Deal. And more important, is committed to contribute to the advancement of these instruments. But our goals can only be reached through a strong cooperation between different actors and stakeholders, public, private, business, NGOs, and the society in territory. I will finish with another achievement of the last few years, the United Nations Ocean Conference. Portugal will host the second conference in Lisbon in 2022, co-organized with Kenya, and I'm confident that we'll take these debates to a new level, conveying the governance message that without protection and strong knowledge, we cannot have oceans that prosper. And without prosperity and shared international governance goals, we cannot have development and social equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for this strong statement as responsible Minister of Maritime Affairs in Portugal. And Portugal is currently presidency of the European Union, so we really appreciate that you have taken the time to join us here at this international conference. I like your reference to sustainable seafood, and I really hope that very soon we can come to Lisbon and enjoy sustainable seafood together with a cold glass of white wine, of course, produced also in a sustainable way. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Fishes never stopped here in Portugal. They lowered, but they continue. Elsie, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ricardo. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Christine de Peyron, Deputy Managing Director for Human Rights, Global and Multilateral Issues in the European External Action Service. And I have to inform all the participants that the European External Action Service co-leads the international ocean governance efforts. And we are really happy that you are here with us and that you are bringing in the foreign policy angle into our debate. Christine, please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Minister, as well as the illustrious panel before, for your very inspiring and dedicated interventions. I'm really honored to be here from the European External Action Service for this third edition of this forum. And it's shown today that it really is a very participative forum and platform. And we have indeed supported it with Digimara from the very outset. This forum has proven to be a very important convening power in bringing together stakeholders across the world. And that is the first key point of convergence with EU foreign policy, fostering cooperation across thematic boundaries in support of global solutions. And that is, of course, at the very heart of EU external action. And as EU, we can and we do, and we must keep engaging collectively, member states together with EU institutions for improved ocean management. And sometimes we now label this Team Europe. So if you like, that's yet another sense of the all crew on deck approach. For this to happen, we have to have what we call ocean diplomacy that is comprehensive and multi-layered. We need all actors, be they United Nations, to local mediators, NGOs, and community activists, to set the right course for a sustainable blue planet. So both top-down and bottom-up pressure and action. And this is, of course, yet another and more wider all crew on deck approach that we need. We know about the interconnections between ocean degradation, climate change, biodiversity loss, and that's been, amply described today. And this means that what we call the green and the blue diplomacy to counter global emissions and halt biodiversity loss and reduce pollutions must also converge and work together. And we know that we need ambitious decisions and rapid action, and that has been repeated many times here, to address the challenges we stand in front of. And this year could be decisive in achieving critical progress towards some of our objectives. In 2021, it has been mentioned already, the UN launches the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, the Our Ocean Conference, and especially the Biodiversity and Climate Conferences in Kunming and Glasgow in the second part of this year will offer us really key moments to seize for the joining up of collective efforts. We're also looking back today at more than 1 year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and one major lesson we learned from this crisis was that tackling global challenges requires collaborative efforts. The ocean is one connected system, so governing this global public good is our shared responsibility. If we ever needed reminding of the need for strong cooperation and joining the dots between nature and human health and well-being, this is it. This joined up whole of government approach is also the spirit that underpins our European Green Deal. And the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is also a central guiding principle for its policies and strategies. We intend to continue to vigorously contribute to robust international frameworks, not least on biodiversity and oceans, starting with our own enhanced domestic commitments, and hopefully that can also inspire others in elevating their ambitions. The further development of our international ocean agenda will put us in a position to contribute to achieve SDG 14, which is by far not achieved yet, and to deliver on the external dimension of the Green Deal. And the coherent pursuit of external policy goals is crucial for our efforts to ensure a healthy ocean and planet for generations to come. No silos, but a coherent pursuit of external policy goals. Multilateralism is in our view, the way to address problems that require collective action, but it does deliver tangible results. And the Paris Agreement is, of course, a perfect example of this. We shall be able to draw inspiration from that valuable work in placing ocean governance in line with the external dimension of the Green Deal at the heart of international action to make peace with nature. We will make use of all our leverage in multilateral fora for an ambitious agreement at the UN to protect biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdictions, which has been mentioned previously, for a green and blue recovery from the health crisis, for advocating for a global agreement to reduce marine litter and microplastics, as well as to help to broker an agreement on establishing the marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean, and also promoting sustainable ocean governance at the UN Food System Summit in September 2021. So let me conclude by also mentioning briefly another pillar that is important in our work and critical for EU foreign policy, and that's the maritime security. This means concretely active engagement both within the EU, in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea, and internationally, fighting against piracy, smuggling, and organized crime in the Gulf of Guinea or in the Horn of Africa or Red Sea to achieve safe and secure seas. And it goes without saying that such security is an essential precondition for marine research, trade, protection, and a sustainable blue economy. So to conclude this, I would like to say that in response to global challenges, and not least ocean protection and governance, we have to demonstrate our sense of responsibility to play our part in a cooperative way. And we want to show leadership by further developing our international ocean governance agenda. And we are ready to put our convening power at the service of multilateralism to promote global responsibility on the ocean. Together, we believe we can set the course for the future for more effective, sustainable ocean governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for bringing in the international and the foreign policy angle with a view to the World Food System Summit. Let us really not forget that world food security will not be achieved without sustainable fisheries, and that we have to make strong recommendations at the summit in order to ensure that fisheries sustainability and marine protected areas will really go together. Thanks a lot. Now I'm going to ask Charlina Vicheva, who has opened this meeting 3 hours and 13 minutes ago, to take the floor and to close it. Thank you so very much for staying the whole time with us and for providing the opportunity for this very interesting exchange. Charlina, please, close the meeting.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Deep-hearted thank you for the great work that you have done. We are coming now to the end of this forum, and I'm particularly pleased, and this is not an exaggeration, with the diversity and richness of contributions and interventions by our speakers, panelists, and thank you very much to all the participants. And it is not only the content and substance, but I have to tell you that the passion, which is quite typical for the community, for the ocean community, was present today, and it shows that we have a lot of energy in the system. What we have heard today is a great compliment to the forum's recommendations so far, and casts the way for the future action. What we have heard today, and I was quite attentive in listening to each and every intervention, confirms that we are on the right course of action, not only now, but also since 2016. Of course, there are changes. We will do recalibrating, and we have a number of new elements, but we are on the right track. Again, Alexander, special thanks to you. I know that it is difficult to applaud whoever in this modality of working, but I want to express the whole community's thanks to you. You have guided us quite smoothly through the debate and meeting today, and you have managed to not only to keep the time right, but also to provoke an interesting discussion and panel sessions. Managing the sessions in these circumstances is not easy at all, and it is quite a challenge, I would say. And I would like also to thank all the panelists to obey to the rules and to this new virtual way of doing things. Still, I have to say that I hope that we will be able very soon, after the pandemic peaks down, to have the normal way of eye-to-eye and physical meetings where we can feel the energy of the event as well. Many thanks to all the excellent experts, practitioners, and visionaries sharing thoughts. We had the commissioner, we had Ricardo, the Portuguese minister, and I'm extremely happy that we had such a good plethora of commission service representatives. So it was a very nice bunch of interventions. Last but not least, I would like to thank all the participants and everyone that contributed throughout this 1 year of open consultation. I have to say also that, and I will abuse a bit the fact that I'm closing the event. We've heard today and previously a lot about knowledge, science, research. And I'm happy to link today's forum with something that happened this morning and should have continued in the afternoon. This is the launch of the Knowledge Center for Earth Observation. Many colleagues and practitioners talked about the Copernicus service, the marine service within it, about EMODNet. And I think that today is a double feast because we have the forum, which ends up with richness and inclusiveness, but also the fact that we are launching the Earth Observation Knowledge Center, which covers a lot of what we're doing on the marine side. We will now turn to the drawing board to turn all the recommendations and richness from this forum and ideas into concrete policy actions. And we have to identify how to update our ocean agenda. As the Commissioner said at the beginning, Commissioner Sinkevičius, we intend to present an updated agenda next year, but we are not going to rest in the meantime. We are going to continue organizing events, workshops to present the evolution of our work. And of course, quite imminently, we are looking forward to the Portuguese presidency work on sustainable blue economy. And please expect and let's look forward to the communication that the Commission is going to issue next month on sustainable blue economy. Many thanks for all your efforts. and see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene.
Stay healthy. Thank you for closing.
Thank you, Alexander, John.
Thank you, everyone.
Christine.
Bye.
Okay, it was a pleasure to be here. Bye.
Thank you for the closing words. Let me make two housekeeping announcements. First of all participants will receive a link to the recording and a copy of the strategy. And I would like to highlight again that the Commissioner has announced that the Commission is going to update the IOG agenda based on the recommendations, based on your input. Let me thank the IOG Forum for preparing the recommendations. Let me thank the people working all behind the scene who have communicated with me on several digital channels and told me, go on and make this and that. Thanks a lot for all the support. And again, I would like to apologize to those who have expected a second or third question. We were just running out of time, but I think overall you provided very valuable inputs. Thank you a lot, and let's continue to work. Thank you and have a good day.